Good morning, it is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
Budget Eve. With one day to go, a defiant Chancellor makes a last-ditch bid to convince her own party about her make-or-break budget.
Ukraine is hit by drones overnight as President Zelensky warns against giving in to Russian demands during peace negotiations.
Tech giants need to step up and protect women and girls from online abuse. The communication watchdog talks tough, but stops short of making new guidance mandatory.
Also today, we'll be speaking to the chief executive of the energy giant Centrica, who says the shift to green energy will lead to job losses.
Plus, Wicked, it is a box office hit, but it's not defying gravity for the critics.
I was going to say, that's not the boss of Centrica there. Right, one day to go. It's Budget Eve. This is something you've coined this term.
I'm going to take it.
Or do you do this every year? It's the first time I've heard of it.
It's the first time, I think.
It's been such a build-up this year. It's like we finished our Advent calendars. It's Budget Eve. Very exciting. And very exciting for all of us. Is it exciting for Rachel Reeves or is it nerve-wracking? Well, we're braced for what might be a fairly gloomy statement.
Yeah, so the speculation is that the Chancellor is going to freeze income tax thresholds, which means, of course, dragging more people into paying more income tax. But she won't raise the headline tax rate. So that means, of course, she'll be able to say that she's stuck to her promise not to raise income tax. But it won't feel like that to people who are paying a higher rate.
She urged Labour MPs to present a united front and to back her plans. And she was cheered last night at the weekly meeting of Labour MPs when she said she would still be in number 11 by this time next year and the year after.
Now, look, we're all guessing, of course, but one day out, it seems like her approach is going to be freezing those tax thresholds. Here's Ed Conway to explain.
That was a year ago. That was the budget where Rachel Reeves said this was going to be the big tax-raising budget. She wasn't going to have to come back for much more. How have things changed so much in just 12 and a bit months? Well, the main thing you've got to know about this, OK, there are two factors here. The first of them is the fact that the economy isn't doing as well as a lot of people had hoped. This is just showing you productivity, which is kind of the best measure of how well off, how much better off we're getting each year. It's our bang for our buck across the economy. And up until 2008, it looked like that was kind of going perpetually higher, but then, as we all know, it didn't go higher. So it's basically flatlined or gone up really weakly since then. You can see the pandemic there. And the gap between where we might have been and where we are now is 23%. We are 23% poorer than it looked like we might have been. And that feeds into everything else. So that's 23% less in tax revenue, which means a hole in the budget. So that's number one part of the hole, and we're going to hear more from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, about that. The second part of the hole is a year ago or so, Rachel Reeves had all these plans about cutting welfare, and a lot of them haven't happened. And as a result of them, these U-turns, the welfare bill is forecast, this is forecast off into the future, is forecast to carry on rising. And so those two things together, extra spending on the one hand and less money coming in because the economy's not doing as well, they're the two main dynamics overshadowing this budget, raising the question, what does the government do about it? Well, the main answer, we suspect, is going to be something economists call fiscal drag, which I know is terrible terminology. I'm going to illustrate how it actually works, though, because this is really important. It means basically you're raising extra money without having to raise the rate of income tax. That's showing you the median income, so average salary, average incomes across the economy before tax, going back the last few years. And this is the critical thing, is the personal allowance. That's basically the point at which you start having to pay tax on your income. So anything below that line, that's untaxed income. Anything above the line, that's tax. That's the tax, basically, that you have to pay. And here's the key thing. Look at that line. Under the coalition government, they increased that quite a lot. And then, in the last few years, that has been left flat. And as it's been left flat, have a look at this. As that's been left flat, the gap between these two has got bigger. The amount that we have to pay on our earnings in tax has got bigger. And if, as is expected, Rachel Reeves decides to leave that flat, so to freeze the personal allowance for another few years, look at what happens here. Even if our earnings go up, the amount that we're squeezed by taxes goes up. And just to kind of underline this, back in 2019, 52% of income of the average earner was taxed. If that continues, it's going to be 64%. So that brings in quite a lot of extra money because we are going to be paying more in tax because of fiscal drag. But the question is that Rachel Reeves is facing, how does she raise the other money that basically will fill that hole in her budget?
Ed Conway there breaking down the charts for us as always brilliantly, and it's a big question. What other measures will be in the budget? And I guess we don't know exactly, but Tamara's here to break down some of the other big talking points, which I think, waking up this morning, is this fighting talk and possibly uniting talk, oddly, from Rachel Reeves amongst her MPs last night.
Yeah, it's been a tumultuous few weeks for the Chancellor, with lots of briefing about the budget coming from the heart of government. And last night she addressed Labour MPs in Parliament and told them politics is a team sport. She said they will like what's in the budget, they will consider it fair and progressive, but she said it's a package, it's not a pick and mix. You have to publicly support the whole thing and not say, oh, I like the cola bottles, as she put it, but not the fruit salad. She said they can't go out on the airwaves saying, oh, I didn't like this bit. She said it's a whole package and they have to accept it. And then in response to speculation about her position, she said, I'll be here on Wednesday, I'll be here next year, and I will be here, she said, the year after. So she's trying to shore up their support for it. There's reports in the Financial Times today that the Treasury are trying to get banks to come out and publicly support the budget. She knows that the stakes are very high here, especially since we expect she's going to be raising lots of different taxes rather than one big lever like income tax. Lots of things can then possibly go wrong, but she's trying to get Labour MPs on side and say, you know, the worst thing to do would be to be divided over it.
So if you're someone, watching at home, how are you going to be impacted tomorrow? I mean, I know we don't know it all, obviously, but we have got a bit of a sense of some things, right?
We've got strong steers. So Labour MPs have wanted for a long time the two-child benefit cap to be lifted, and we expect that that's going to be the biggest spending measure tomorrow. That is something. It doesn't poll particularly well with the public, but Labour MPs feel it's a really important issue to look at child poverty and try and alleviate child poverty. So that's going to be in there. We also expect there's going to be lots of revenue raises, including suggestions of a tax on high-value properties, a kind of mansion tax, if you like. On the suggestion today, it will be on properties worth over £2 million, as they've not had a council tax revaluation in a very long time. There's also going to be measures suggested on cash ISAs. People who save $20,000 a year in a cash ISA, that limit may be reduced to $12,000 to try and get people to invest in higher risk stocks and shares ISAs. That could go down badly. Salary sacrifice schemes, which is effectively kind of another tax, also expected to be in her sight. So look, there's going to be lots of taxes raised, and the Chancellor's been clear about the need for that. But she's told Labour MPs the choices made in there will be progressive, will support people at the bottom of the income scale as well as the top. And so she is going to hope that this gets her through a tricky few weeks.
The big sort of revenue raiser that we are expecting, that Ed was talking about there, rather than putting up the income tax rate, it's freezing the levels at which you kind of kick into a higher income tax band yourself. A year ago, what did she do around that? And what does it imply in terms of how that might go down with people this year?
So this freeze was actually introduced by the Conservatives to last until 2028. They said that's how long it would last. And Rachel Reeves said that it would hit working people. She essentially acknowledged it was a tax rise on working people because as people's incomes go up, more of them get dragged into the higher tax bands. Now we expect, of course nothing's confirmed until tomorrow, that she's going to extend that freeze to 2030 by another 2 years. You get more and more people dragged into each tax band and their pay rises kind of get eroded by that. How that doesn't break Labour's manifesto is going to be a question that Conservatives ask. She'll throw back at them, well, this was your idea in the first place. And I expect that she's going to, given what we know from what Sam Coates reported yesterday, the growth forecast being downgraded, I expect she'll try and blame Brexit, austerity, the inheritance that Labour got from the Conservatives for that. But I think a year and a half into government, there's going to be sort of big questions about whether there's going to be any good news on the horizon.
Can I ask a question, both of you, actually? She's saying it's progressive, right? Which basically means the wealthiest pay more than, those on lower incomes. But freezing tax thresholds, and particularly the kind of personal allowance, that isn't progressive, is it? Because, I remember back in the day when, Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems were saying that if you're, making the personal allowance more generous, then that's helping those people on low incomes.
I think the point on that is it is progressive in that still ultimately people on higher incomes pay more tax.
Yeah.
I think the point when people argue about this, and this is a totally, there's all arguments on all sides. Actually, as we stand as a G7 nation, people on medium to high incomes already pay a slightly higher portion of our total tax take. And maybe they should pay more, and maybe that's necessary. But it's an interesting snapshot versus other countries. I think the point really on freezing the tax thresholds is it is a slightly deceptive way of increasing income tax that people pay without actually breaching the manifesto by the letter. My question, almost to both of you guys on this, is whether they still take the political hit for that. Could you just have... not forgetting that the NIC issue a year ago where they put up national insurance contribution paid by companies as opposed to people, and they said it wasn't a manifesto breach. For all of the sort of pitch rolling of we are going to put income tax up, actually, no, it's going to upset people too much, so we're not, will people still look at this and feel like, well, you basically have anyway?
And I think they've decided that the political hit that they would take by increasing income tax for the first time since the 1970s was so great that they couldn't risk doing it. So they obviously feel that is just too obvious, especially when you're using it to pay for higher welfare. So I think they decided that this would be less of a political hit because, it's something the Conservatives first did. They're just extending it. The idea is that it's temporary. People will still feel they're not going to be feel better off after this budget. On the point about the personal allowance, interesting one, because when the personal allowance kept increasing under the coalition and people had more money in their pockets, one of the criticisms was this actually, most of the money, the billions of pounds that were spent on that, would help people at the top of the income scale. Although it starts being taken away when you earn £100,000, that sort of 70 to 100,000, that was helping all of those people rather than most of the money going on people at the bottom. So I think it's a difficult one, but the Labour have chosen to freeze the personal allowance and then drag more people into these tax bans. And, I think the question will be, if the government's number one stated priority is growth, how are they going to how are they going to affect that?
Have we got time for one more very quick comment?
Oh.
No, we haven't. I'm going to do it very later. Next hour. Save it for next hour. Oh, gosh. People are definitely going to turn off now.
Come on, Wilf, we can't tease
I was going to say
that.
The point on freezing the tax thresholds on the business and economic community is at least pulling one of the big levers. So this debate of do you do tons of small tax increases that really hurt the economy, or do you do something that's politically damaging but might be less bad for the economy? It still at least falls into that bucket.
And raises a lot of money.
It might raise 7 or 8 billion in one go. It might, in fact, still give them the political hit. That's kind of my point. You might kind of get hit on both sides, but I think it is, at least if you're raising about 20, at least if one of the things being done raises almost half of that, there's not too much of a long tail. And in that sense, it's not as bad as it could be, I guess, for business. Well, there we go. We really have to wrap now. Tomorrow, great stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let us know, I should say, how you're feeling ahead of tomorrow's budget, what you want to see in the budget. Are you feeling the squeeze? How well off do you feel right now as well? Get in touch with us on mornings@sky.uk. That's mornings@sky.uk. Or you can find us on social media as well, at Ridge and Frost on X too.
Right, let's talk now about Ukraine. And Russian drone strikes hit the capital, Kiev, overnight, killing at least 6 people.
Now, it comes just hours before Keir Starmer hosts a virtual meeting of Ukraine's European allies to try and discuss this peace deal that people are hoping might end the war.
Meanwhile, there's been a big push at the White House to get a deal done between Ukraine and Russia, with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky set to hold talks. Ivor Bennett has more for us from Moscow.
So the shuttle diplomacy is continuing apace, it seems. Yesterday, the Americans were meeting with the Ukrainians in Geneva, remember, for a second day of talks there. But now it seems it's the turn of the Russians, with the Financial Times reporting this morning that the Americans flew from Switzerland to Abu Dhabi last night to meet with a delegation from Moscow there, and those talks are reportedly continuing today. And it's also being reported that a Ukrainian official that is there as well, although it's unclear at the moment if they're all meeting together or if the Ukrainian side and the Russian side are being kept apart. But either way, it is clearly a concerted push from the Trump administration to try and find a deal that's palatable for both sides to get things over the line. It began, remember, at the end of last week with a 28-point plan, which the Americans had drawn up in secret with the Russians and then presented to the Ukrainians. But that was a one-sided plan, crossing a lot of Ukraine's red lines on things like territory, on NATO membership, on the size of its armed forces. And initially, Washington was trying to press Ukraine into agreeing that by Thursday. But over the last couple of days, it seems that Kyiv has talked Washington around more to their side. They've come up with an alternative proposal, a 19-point plan that changes or removes all those contentious points. But now the problem is that that's not palatable for Moscow. Last night, the Kremlin was saying that that alternative plan is not constructive. It doesn't work for them. And so now we're in the situation where the Americans are desperately trying to find some middle ground. But remember, this is middle ground that hasn't existed since the war began nearly 4 years ago, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed over the last few days, despite all these diplomatic developments. Well, the Russian press has gone over all the points as well, of course, particularly the counter-proposal, these 19 points, but they are presenting it as far too pro-Ukrainian. The initial plan was, they are saying, was much more kind of down the middle, much more fair to all sides. And the way they're presenting the diplomacy over the weekends, where the Europeans and the Ukrainians were getting involved, they were trying to portray Ukraine and Europe as throwing a spanner in the works, trying to derail and sabotage Donald Trump's peace efforts. They present themselves as the reasonable party, of course. But in Europe's eyes, in Ukraine's eyes, the initial plan, those 28 points, was just read like a Moscow wish list. And so that's why we're in this situation now, where we've got these two counter-offers. And in many ways, you just get a strong sense of déjà vu, because events of the last few days, OK, it's a different setting, different plans, but they are just reiterating, both sides are reiterating their long-held demands and red lines.
Ivor Bennett there for us. We're going to be talking more about that later, to a former Russian dissident as well.
Now, for the Lionesses, the memory of this summer's Euros victory should be a happy one, but for some, it was overshadowed by some pretty horrific online abuse that was directed at some of the players.
Well, today, Ofcom is urging tech firms to do more to protect women and girls online.
The watchdogs set out guidelines for social media sites like Instagram or X to try and help protect women in sport, politics and other public arenas as well. And actually, to be honest, it should be everyone everywhere, to be honest, because they say that they're facing significant and widespread abuse online every day.
Rob Harris has been looking into it for us.
During the Euros, the racism sent to Jess Carter ignited calls for action. The Lioness powerfully revealing to me immediately after winning the trophy how online hate nearly forced her to quit.
Without the fans, my family, my teammates, I'm not sure that I'd ever had the courage to go back on the pitch and play again. I'm not really someone who struggles with, the hate that they receive, because everyone's going to have their opinion. But this tournament's been really tough, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to come back on the pitch and do me. And every one of those fans, I'm not ever going to be able to show my thanks enough.
But 4 months on, while Carter's been adding to her trophy collection in America, still no sign of a fresh impetus to tackle abuse from social media platforms. Now Ofcom is stepping in. The boss of the communications regulator telling me how tech firms need to make it safer online, particularly for women and girls, and particularly for sports stars.
I think we're going to lose talent in sport. Lots of places where women in particular feel that, if they go out there in a public role, they just get abused, and sometimes the toll on them and their families is not something that they can manage.
Ofcom has now advised the likes of X and Instagram to include prompts telling users to reconsider harmful messages, stopping payments if posts promote misogynistic abuse and sexual violence, and ensuring For You recommended posts have more perspectives and are not toxic echo chambers.
It's not about curtailing anyone's freedom of expression. It's about nudges and prompts. It's about better reporting. It's about clearer privacy settings. All of these ideas have come from experts or victims or survivors themselves.
There is an urgency. Sky News recently revealed suspected online hate crimes referred to police have quadrupled this season in English football. And for former England star Leanne Sanderson, the Ofcom recommendations are lacking.
I feel so passionately about there needing to be online identification to have an account, because someone like myself has had death threats. I'm a woman of colour. you know, I'm gay. There's loads of things that people can't handle. And that's where it comes to me. It's not even about my job.
The job for tech firms, not just prioritising profit, but protecting users. And if moves to reduce toxicity and trolling fall short, Ofcom says it will ask the government to strengthen online safety laws, but not for 2 years, when action is being demanded now to clean up their sites from vicious abuse. Rob Harris, Sky News.
We're going to be talking more about the story as well, those guidelines on violence against women and girls, with the Chief of Ofcom, who we saw in that report, Dame Melanie Dawes. That's at 8:15 this morning on Ridge and Frost. Now, it's Budget Eve. There's an awful lot of speculation around one department that's expected could actually end up being pretty much protected or even getting a small bump is health. It's such a huge issue. And I'm pleased to say we are now joined by Karin Smyth, who's Health Minister. Great to have you on the programme. First of all, we've been talking today about Rachel Reeves' kind of big pitch to MPs last night, basically saying back the budget, it's not a pick and mix. Were you in the room?
I was, yes, I was.
How was that?
It was great. Rachel is on great form, and I think a meeting amongst colleagues, she's very upbeat about that and delivered a message about what we're trying to do with the budget, and cost of living, protecting our public services, getting that debt down, and rallying the troops.
So happy families for now, then, is the message, is it? Well, I do see the details.
They are. I mean, I know there are a lot of interest when people aren't in the room for Parliamentary Labour Party gatherings, but I think it's important that she comes, that senior ministers always come and talk to colleagues particularly before big events. It's a regular Monday night event, and it was great to have her.
So you're funding new neighbourhood health centres. This is what you're doing today. What was the idea?
So when we announced our 10-year plan about getting care out of hospitals closer to where people live, we talked about neighbourhood health centres, and these is really the delivery of those centres across the country. The health service is really sort of built services not around people. And at the moment, we've got a lot of people that are being bounced around the system, and we want to make sure that that care is closer to home and it's built around them.
What are they?
So they are like one-stop shops, I think is an easy way for people to understand, so that when you go to your GP, that you might have along there more nursing support, more testing, more diagnostics.
So you can go to your GP,
pharmacies.
You don't have to go and get a blood test from your hospital, for example.
Exactly
you can
right.
Just do it there.
Exactly
basically.
right. Have it there in that one-stop shop, building the care and the services around you, particularly frailty, older people, people with diabetes and heart conditions, for example. We know that those people with multiple conditions are struggling, they're travelling unnecessarily, they're having lots and lots of different tests, repeating their stories, all of that, bringing it close to home. Largely based in deprived areas, these new centres, because that's where the need is, and that is a fundamental part of what we're doing to bring down waiting lists.
So the press release says that the centres will be part of a new neighbourhood health service that will provide end-to-end care. And I guess, my question is on hospices, because I just wonder if you can say that at a time when the hospice sector is in crisis. I did an interview last week with Helen Glenister, the Isabel Hospice, and it really stuck with me. She was talking about the kind of services she was having to cut like services like support for children who'd, lost their mums and things like that. And she said that the overnight rise in national insurance added $220,000 to their costs overnight. These are charities, they're not majority funded by taxpayers, as you well know. And it feels like you're just hitting them with this tax rise. Is it something that you'd like Rachel Reeves to look at in the budget?
Well, it is, hospices provide an enormously important service as part of end-of-life care. And when we say we're transferring services out of hospital into the community, basing it around people in primary care, that's what end-to-life and end-to-end care does mean. We don't talk enough about end-of-life care as part of the overall services that the state provides, and that we work with the voluntary and community sector as well. And they are an important part of that. Most people want to die at home. Most people want to die in their community with their family, and most people can do that.
On the hospices, though, do you accept that this is a sector that is struggling? They're having to cut
absolutely
vital services. It kind of feels like the NHS is relying on hospices to provide this most important service. And then as a government, you're making their work even harder.
Well, we have put in the greatest £100 million capital last year into the hospices in recognition of the work they do. My colleague Steve Kinnock
hit them with this massive tax rise as well, haven't you?
But that funding also went to improve the health service. That is part of some of the choices that that were made in the last budget to protect the health service, to get those waiting lists down, to support the overall sector. My colleague Stephen Kinnock is working with the sector. We are looking at palliative care and end-of-life care as part of the overall package, recognising that does need to be better. We are all going to die. That, you know, and recognising that and having that part of the end-of-life care is absolutely what we need to be doing, and they're an important part of that.
Tomorrow, of course, is the budget. One department that it does look like might get a spending rise is the NHS, paid for, of course, by these potentially quite painful tax rises. You know, is all that money just going to go on kind of striking residential doctors?
The Chancellor protected the NHS and our public services in the last budget, and that, as you've outlined, does involve those hard choices. But it is yielding results. Those waiting lists are coming down by over 200,000. We had more GPs put into post. Access is improving. It's got a long way to go. We understand that. And part of what this move to more neighbourhood health services to reduce those waiting lists is a fundamental part of that. It is really difficult. The strikes are really difficult. They do knock some of that improvement off course. But those green shoots are there, and I think people are starting to feel that. And staff are starting to feel that. The pressure is huge. We're going into winter. You know, we understand all of those problems.
Yeah.
But reducing that pressure, treating people closer to home, building services around people, not expecting people to fit with the convenience of how services have long-term been organised.
Sounds like a great track record.
But that is what we're doing.
Is your boss, Wes Streeton, going to end up in number 10 soon as a reward?
Wes Streeton is absolutely focused on driving us all in the health team to do what we're doing, and that is yielding results. We know it's green shoots. We know recovery is going to be long and hard.
According to the Times, he's eyeing up the May elections to make his mood. Sources today, Wes is the best option to bring the party together. He's quids in to win over the soft left. Wes has got the judgment and political appetite to win over the country. What's going on?
I don't know where all that comes from, and I think people get really fed up with it. I do. I know that we're absolutely focused every day on getting down these waiting lists, improving access for GPs. That is our promise to the British people. That is what they expect us to do, and that is what we're going to do.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Karin Smyth speaking to us there. Lots more coverage, of course, about the upcoming budget, not least, of course, the Chief Executive of Centrica. That is who Wilfred is going to be talking to in just a few minutes.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome back to the news this morning. The Chancellor has urged Labour MPs to present a united front ahead of a budget unveiling tomorrow. Rachel Reeves warned her Westminster peers against supporting a pick and mix of the policies they like. She said all announcements would be fair.
Russian drone strikes hit Kiev overnight, hours before Sir Keir Starmer hosts a virtual meeting of Ukraine's European allies to discuss a peace deal. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says a proposed plan drawn up by America and Russia has been refined, but the most sensitive points are still to be discussed with Donald Trump.
The communications watchdog Ofcom says women in sport and politics are facing significant levels of abuse online every day. They're urging tech companies to step up their efforts to tackle trolling and also strengthen online safety.
And with the cost of living still at the forefront of most of our minds, many will be wondering how tomorrow's budget will help or hinder that. Last night, the Chancellor told Labour MPs her plans will focus on tackling high prices as energy bills and the price cap continued to rise. I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by the Chief Executive of Centrica, which, of course, is also known as British Gas to some, or owns British Gas, Chris O'Shea. Thanks so much for joining us. Very good morning to you.
Thanks for having me and good morning.
I wanted to just step back and before we get to the budget and talk big picture, which is that despite being the owners of British Gas, you are a big believer in the long-term energy transition, the move from fossil fuels to renewable power.
Yes, yeah, indeed. So British Gas is our historic name. We were the state-owned gas company many years ago, and we supply about 27% of UK gas, but we also supply about 23% of UK electricity. And the energy transition is absolutely essential. We have to decarbonise the economy. The question is the pace at which we do it and the technology that we use to do it.
And in terms of that final point, are you suggesting that we've become too accelerated, that we're imposing too many targets on it, that we could take our foot off the gas a bit?
No, I think there's three things that you've got to think about. You've got to think about energy security, you've got to think about affordability, and you've got to think about sustainability, or the cleanliness. And these things are sometimes in conflict. And so we've just got to make sure that as we progress to decarbonise, to get clean, sustainable energy, we do it in a way that's affordable and we make sure that we've got energy security.
Are we doing that at the moment?
So I think we're doing quite well. I think there's some things that we could improve. I think that we're seeing, for example, the regulator is about to give a new settlement to network companies. Based on what they've indicated that they'll propose, that will add £42 to every residential customer's electricity bill from April next year. Now, that's nearly £1 a week. That's a lot of money for people that are struggling. So I think that there's different ways that we can look at this, and I think the regulator has really got to think about affordability in terms of the pace at which we do this.
When it comes to both green energy and lowering our carbon emissions, but also cheaper energy, where do you stand on, clearly, the gas and oil that we still use, importing it versus drilling it our own? Is that a misnomer from the lobby that suggests if we did more of it ourselves, it would be both greener and cheaper, or not?
So we produce gas in the North Sea, but we don't explore for it anymore. And that's not a political statement, it's just that it wasn't an activity we're very good at. So we produce gas, but we don't explore. So if tomorrow we reopened the North Sea for exploration, Centrica wouldn't take any licences. So we don't really have a dog in that fight. If we produce more gas domestically, it will definitely be cleaner than imported gas. Now, we do import gas, and we just bought the UK's largest LNG terminal. So we can benefit from importing gas. But the right thing for the country is to produce the gas that we've got domestically. Now, the argument against that would be, if you produce more gas domestically, you simply have more gas on the global market. And there's some credibility to that argument. But if we're looking for the cheapest gas and we're looking for the cleanest gas in terms of carbon emissions, the domestically produced gas is the cheapest gas, is the cleanest gas.
And at the moment, what portion of the gas that we burn comes from overseas? And most of it comes from Norway, which is not that far away, but it doesn't all come from Norway?
So about 55% of UK gas is imported. We get probably around half of that comes from Norway. We're the biggest buyer of Norwegian gas. So we bring a lot of gas in through a pipeline into the east coast of the UK. That is cleaner than LNG because LNG effectively liquefied natural gas. You produce natural gas somewhere, you use energy to chill it, it turns into liquid, you ship it, the shipping's got emissions, the chilling's got emissions, and then you effectively defrost it. So that's got higher emissions, but around 55 to 60% of our gas is imported.
So I guess my final summing up question on this particular part is, are we just being a bit too fervently religious about the transition? And if we showed a bit more flexibility, could we in fact be both greener and cheaper?
So I think you'll find that there's a lot of noise in this debate, and there's a lot laid at the door of whatever government's in power. The reality is, between the two main parties, there is cross-party consensus on this. Our decarbonisation started under the Tony Blair-Gordon Brown government, it continued under the Coalition, it continued under the Conservatives, and it's continued under the current Labour government. And so what we're seeing at the moment is the product of more than 25 years of decarbonisation, excuse me, rather than something that's happened in the last 18 months or so. So I get a bit disappointed when it becomes a political football, because the reality is that this was not all done by the current government, it wasn't all done by the previous government, it's successive governments that have looked to decarbonise. And I just think at the moment, you've got inflation in the supply chain, and we've got the previous government, I think, stopped the exploration of the issuance of new licences in the North Sea. We don't think that's the right thing. We told the previous government, we told the current government, we think that there should be exploration in the North Sea. I'm worried about the loss of jobs there. I'm worried about the people that work in that industry. But also I'm worried about the fact that we're bringing in higher carbon gas into the UK. So we should produce our own gas.
Clearly the budget is coming up tomorrow. Are there simple, specific changes that you are optimistic will come that would help or not?
So there are some simple changes that we can do. Whether they're going to come or not is anybody's guess. We'll find out tomorrow when the Chancellor stands up. What we've argued for many, many years is that the policy costs of decarbonisation, which currently sit on electricity bills, should be moved to general taxation. That would take about £200 out of people's bills. And the reason for that is that general taxation is more progressive, so those with the broadest shoulders bear the biggest responsibility, whereas on energy bills as they are at the moment, then everybody picks up the same. It doesn't matter whether you're very rich or very poor, you pick up the same cost just now. If the Chancellor could do that, she could take about just over 10% off electricity bills. That would put more people in more money into people's pockets. It would help people that are struggling. So we've called for that for a long time. We also call for a social tariff, where those that can't afford their gas and electricity will pay less, and those that can will pay a bit more. I'm not sure we'll see that tomorrow in the budget, but I really hope that we see the transfer of policy costs onto the general taxation bill.
I guess it's fair to say your pay is public. You know, you paid £4 or £5 million last year. You're one of the people with the broader shoulders. You'd be happy to pay more tax to fund that sort of thing?
I think that would apply to both of us. Anybody here in the studio, I think that we are fortunate enough to have a well-paid job. I personally would be happy to pay more. I think that's fairer. I think I believe in progressive taxation, so and that's why we call for these costs to be put onto general taxation.
I wanted to ask about a couple more things if we've got time. Energy price levy, which energy companies paying 78%. In terms of compared to the corporate tax rate, which is much lower. Is that an example where if the tax rate came down, the tax revenue could go up? Do you think there'd be a flood of investment if it came down or not really?
I think it's very hard to tell. I think that what we're looking for from the Chancellor tomorrow is a continuation of the push for growth. And anything that stimulates growth and reduces the cost of living and inflation would be appreciated. I think anything that we can do to get the North Sea working better so we have more domestically produced gas is to be applauded. We pay the 78% tax, and we think that there's a case for that tax to be changed. But whether that would result in a flood of investment, I don't know. And these are the decisions the Chancellor's got to make. You've got to try and figure out what will happen if you change X, Y, or Z policy.
Just very quickly to end off, Zia Youssef of Reform was pointing out yesterday the amount being spent on fish. Some £700 million at Hinkley Point C. It's a nuclear power plant. You're not involved in that one. You're involved with one at Sizewell. And that in terms of the number of fish it's meant to help, £280,000 per fish is the estimate. Whether that's exactly right or not, people are comparing this to the Bat Tunnel with HS2. Do we have too much regulation for these types of projects?
So we have lots of regulation, and the government's call to have regulators focused on growth is absolutely the right thing. Our regulator, mainly Ofgem, has got an awful lot of work to do. They are focused more on micromanagement than on growth, and they really need to create an environment to encourage investment. That's the only way that we're going to grow the economy.
Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for stopping by. Well, that story's up next, it
yeah,
seems.
it is. Let's find out more about these fish, the most protected fish in the UK, because as Wilf was just chatting about there, a nuclear power station under construction in Somerset is forking out £700 million on fish protection measures. That's a lot of money.
I mean, it is being compared to this bat tunnel story that everyone's known about for HS2. So among the measures to stop fish from being sucked into Hinkley Point C plant, they need a lot of cooling at nuclear power plants, so they suck in a lot of water from various sources, is what's being called a fish disco, which uses noise to keep them away.
Love it. But despite the amount of money they're spending on this, the modelling predicts, this is the issue, to be honest, only one salmon will be saved every 12 years. And it's even more dire for a sea trout, with one saved every 3 decades. So, look, I think, obviously, we want to protect wildlife in these places, but that doesn't seem like a great yield for your investment, right?
Look, I think if these numbers are accurate, and I don't quite know the extent to which they might be being exaggerated or not, I don't think you'll find anybody that thinks it's worth spending £300,000 per fish. That's not anti-wildlife, it's not anti-fish. Go and spend it on a really great wildlife endeavour and save many fish.
It doesn't seem like it's going to actually save the fish.
No.
It sounds like they don't really. That's probably just random, isn't it? That they might just swim the other way rather than actually because of the disco music that they're hearing.
And nuclear is a growing part of our energy mix, something that Ed Miliband is really committed to, and it does come with a lot of regulation for safety reasons. Importantly, around all of the risks. So it seems like this part of it is a bit excessive.
Yeah, I want to find out more about the fish protection. I'm intrigued by this. Now, the chair of the BBC has told MPs that he regrets making the mistakes that were made over a misleading edit of Donald Trump in a Panorama documentary.
Samir Shah was among a number of senior BBC figures giving evidence to the Culture, Media, Sport Committee yesterday about the crisis prompted by the programme and the subsequent resignation of the corporation's Director General and Head of News. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer has this report.
This was a chance to finally hear from some of those whose names have come up a lot as the drama has played out at the BBC, starting with Michael Prescott.
Do you regret writing the memo, Mr. Prescott?
Summoned before the Culture Committee, the former editorial advisor whose leaked memo brought a hailstorm upon the BBC started by insisting he's a strong supporter of theirs.
What troubled me was that during my 3 years on the BBC's Standards Committee, we kept seeing incipient problems which I thought were not being tackled properly. And indeed, I thought the problems were getting worse.
While he described the resignation of Tim Davie as a tragedy, he insisted the Director General had a blind spot, but stressed that he personally had no political agenda.
Whether people at the BBC think this stuff's been weaponised or not, surely that's a secondary issue. There are very specific things that have been going wrong.
As for his relationship with board member Sir Robbie Gibb, who's been accused of political interference and plotting, there was this.
Yes, I do know Robbie.
And would you call him a friend? Because there's all these rumours swirling around.
Yes, I think that's a fair description, yeah. If you operate in this country, in the sphere of politics, the media and so on, it's not that unusual to come across people you know.
The man himself then appeared straight after. This was the first time we'd seen Sir Robbie Gibb, a political appointee to the BBC board during Boris Johnson's government, who had this to say on how he's been discussed in the press.
There couldn't be a bigger mismatch between the way I'm presented in some quarters in relation to my attitude. I think I'd become weaponised in terms of how I'm perceived. Everyone would know me, I'm hugely impartial.
Summoned to speak alongside was BBC Chair Samir Shah and fellow board member Caroline Thompson. With critics questioning whether the board is still fit for purpose, it was important to present a united front.
Was there anything orchestrated about what's happened to the BBC over the last couple of weeks, the departure of Tim Davie, etc.?
It's up there as one of the most ridiculous charges. People had to find some angle. It's complete nonsense. It's also deeply offensive to fellow board members.
But Samir Shah conceded lessons had been learned, that the board was in the last 3 weeks too slow to respond.
It matters that we are just quicker and get on the front foot.
As for those questioning Samir Shah's leadership, the BBC chair came out fighting.
I think right now my job is to steer the ship out of the shop into an even keel and make sure, and the most important job I have right now is to recruit a Director General.
Questions answered, coup claims denied, and a clear message that the focus should now be on finding a new Director General. But whether this has been enough to satisfy those left with questions about this most recent scandal remains to be seen. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Katie Spencer there for us from just outside the BBC. Lots more still to come here on the programme. When we come back, we're going to be talking more about whether or not the peace deal between Russia and Ukraine can be reached as it slimmed down. What was it originally, 28 points now to 19 points?
Yeah, the main sticking points there. The first one, I guess, over whether Ukraine's going to be forced to give up territory that currently holds. Very, very controversial indeed. And also the second one about assurances to basically make sure that if there is a peace deal, Russia doesn't do exactly the same thing again. We'll be talking about all of that with our next guest.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians. Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah. Back up.
Mr. Navarro, can
Well, it's my... I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance, sir, cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Officials have said that progress has been made on amending the US peace plan for Ukraine. Washington's 28-point plan, presented last week, caused alarm by heavily aligning with Moscow's demands in the nearly 4-year war caused by its invasion. Well, joining us to discuss all of this is the Russian dissident and journalist Mikhail Zygar, who has a new book out, The Dark Side of the Moon, and joins us now. Good morning.
The Earth.
Sorry, Dark Side of the Earth. Pink Floyd on
Not Pink
the mind.
Floyd, yeah.
Sorry about that. But both are great. Let's touch on your backstory first before we can get your perspective on this. And you were editor-in-chief of TV Rain. It was one of the last independent Russian news channels.
It still exists right now in exile, broadcasting from Amsterdam, but was nearly destroyed.
And you've been in exile from Russia for how long?
I left on the third day of the war, February 27th, 2022.
And what's your experience been like since leaving?
Since then, I was sentenced to 8.5 years in absentia for my previous book and for my protest against the war. That's called for spreading fake news about Russian army. Since then, I live in exile, just like 1.5 million of Russians who left in 2022. We are now the part of the outer Russia, which is fighting against Putin's Russia.
And I want to come to your book in a moment, but in terms of what we've seen over the last week, the 28-point plan supposedly now slimmed down by the Ukrainians and the Americans to a 19-point plan. Are you optimistic that these plans will come together, or if this really now is acceptable to the Ukrainians, does that mean it's definitely not going to be acceptable to Vladimir Putin?
There is a problem from the beginning, that Vladimir Putin doesn't want any kind of peace. He needs war. He even doesn't need to win this war. He needs this war to be continued. So it was kind of funny that Donald Trump took all those preconditions put out by Vladimir Putin, what Putin was supposedly demanding for, and actually initial plan was everything Putin was demanding. But that was kind of a trap, because in reality, all those proposals of Vladimir Putin, they were fantastic. He knew that Ukrainians would have never accepted that. Mm-hmm. It was way too much. And the moment when Trump accepted all Putin's ideas, that the reaction from Moscow was not happy. Mm-hmm. Russian propaganda hated the plan. Putin was very cautious. So no, Putin cannot accept any kind of peace deal. He's not interested in that. He wants to continue the war, because the war for him is the possibility to keep the whole Russia under his control. That, for him, that's much more a war for Russia, rather than, he doesn't need new territory. He's fine with continuing this war against Ukraine for longer time.
Your book explores the fall of the Soviet Union, and I guess central to all of this in recent years has been this belief that I guess we all kind of know, that Vladimir Putin wished that had never happened, and that Russia was still, frankly, an empire, perhaps, and that he was a monarch. What is the view of most Russians on that topic? Would they like Ukraine to be part of Russia?
Russia is a very diverse country, as any other country. So we cannot say that Russians want something. We clearly say that probably 20% of Russians agree with what Putin does, and 20% probably disagree, and the majority are trying to pretend that nothing is happening. As in many countries, majority is very apathetic, but in Russia, they are scared. So people are afraid of any kind of discussion about what is really happening. With Soviet Union, with bringing back Soviet Union, that's probably important for that generation that was brought up in the Soviet Union. People like Vladimir Putin. Speaking about making Russia great again, those imperialist ideas, it's ironic that there was no popular demand for that during the last years. On the contrary, during the last 2 decades, Russian standards of living were much higher than in the 90s or in the Soviet period. And people usually, when they feel better, when they have something to be proud of, they don't need that kind of painkiller as national pride or as imperialism. So by starting this war, Putin is trying to impose his old Soviet values onto the new generation, on the new generation which is much freer, which was born and raised after the collapse of Soviet Union, and don't have that imperialist nostalgia.
I wanted to get your take on one thing that Donald Trump has said in the last week, and alongside a lot of things, but in particular is to say that he would like to see Europe do more. that he has now sanctioned, whether it's Indian or Chinese companies that might be buying Russian energy?
No, no. The reason why Vladimir Putin is so happy and so sure that he can go on, there are no real sanctions against Russian oil industry. Russia still gets a lot of money for oil and gas. Russia sells oil even to European Union.
That's what I'm saying.
Via third parties.
Should Europe be doing more as well, is the question?
You know, the West should address the issue that Russia sells oil and it was not affected. Sanctions don't work. Sanctions against Russian fleet don't work. And Russian elite, including Putin, they are sure that sanctions won't work. And probably Trump won't do anything because, you know, the oil prices, the gas prices are important. Everyone in America, everyone remembers 1979 when there were long lines at every gas station, and Carter administration actually collapsed because of that. He doesn't know what to do with oil prices. He cannot ruin the market.
Mikhail, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. Mikhail Sigar there. Gosh, a minute or so left of the hour, and back to all of the build-up on what is Budget Eve.
Yeah, Budget Eve. And I have to say, it's going to be a big one. Some budgets, I think, are more kind of seismic than others. And given the state of the economy, given the kind of financial pressures, the borrowing costs, all that kind of stuff, we know that Rachel Reeves is going to have to move a few pretty big things around.
It's funny, I was thinking this morning about the build-up to budgets, where most of what we used to think about, what's going to be the little rabbit that gets pulled out of the hat, the little measure that everyone's not expecting and will be a small positive for people. And it just feels coming into this that that's irrelevant. They're all going to be seismic changes, and probably not that many that feel like a rabbit out of the hat. They're going to feel like a burden to people.
Yeah, I remember the days when the kind of pasty tax was an omnishambles budget. It feels like a kind of a more lighter time somehow.
I could do with a pasty right now.
There you go, there you go. Lots more of this budget chat coming up in just a few minutes' time. See if Will can get a quick pasty in the break.
Burn my mouth if I did. It's dangerous. We'll be right back.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophy and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Lots to get to.
One day to go until the Chancellor delivers her budget, and she's in defiant mood in front of her own MPs last night.
Ukraine is hit by drones overnight as President Zelensky warns against giving in to Russian demands during peace negotiations.
Tech giants need to step up and protect women and girls from online abuse. The communication watchdog talks tough, but stops short of making new guidance mandatory.
We'll be asking Ofcom's chief executive how this guidance will make a difference.
Plus, Wicked, it's a box office hit, but it's not defying gravity for the critics.
Good morning and welcome. So it's one day to go until one of the most consequential budgets in, well, at least my memory, I'm sure in most people's as well. It's going to have huge political consequences as well.
The headlines this morning are not good for Rachel Reeves. There's speculation and the Chancellor will freeze income tax thresholds, so dragging more people into paying more income tax, but she won't raise the headline tax rate. So she'll be able to say she's stuck to her promise not to raise income tax, but it won't feel like that for those that start paying more in total.
So she urged Labour MPs to present a united front and back her plans. She was cheered last night, I should say, at the weekly meeting of Labour MPs when she said she would still be in number 11 by this time next year and also the year after that as well. So lots to talk about. But first, here's Ed Conway.
That was a year ago. That was the budget where Rachel Reeves said this was going to be the big tax-raising budget. She wasn't going to have to come back for much more. How have things changed so much in just 12 and a bit months? Well, the main thing you've got to know about this, OK, there are two factors here. The first of them is the fact that the economy isn't doing as well as a lot of people had hoped. This is just showing you productivity, which is kind of the best measure of how well off, how much better off we're getting each year. It's our bang for our buck across the economy. And up until 2008, it looked like that was kind of going perpetually higher. But then, as we all know, it didn't go higher. So it's basically flatlined or gone up really weakly since then. You can see the pandemic there. And the gap between where we might have been and where we are now is 23%. We are 23% poorer than it looked like we might have been. And that feeds into everything else. So that's 23% less in tax revenue, which means a hole in the budget. So that's number one part of the hole, and we're going to hear more from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, about that. The second part of the hole is a year ago or so, Rachel Reeves had all these plans about cutting welfare, and a lot of them haven't happened. And as a result of them, these U-turns, the welfare bill is forecast, this is forecast off into the future, is forecast to carry on rising. And so those two things together, extra spending on the one hand and less money coming in because the economy's not doing as well, they're the two main dynamics overshadowing this budget, raising the question, what does the government do about it? Well, the main answer, we suspect, is going to be something economists call fiscal drag, which I know is terrible terminology. I'm going to illustrate how it actually works, though, because this is really important. It means basically you're raising extra money without having to raise the rate of income tax. That's showing you the median income, so average salary, average incomes across the economy before tax, going back the last few years. And this is the critical thing, is the personal allowance. That's basically the point at which you start having to pay tax on your income. So anything below that line, that's untaxed income. Anything above the line, that's tax. That's the tax, basically, that you have to pay. And here's the key thing. Look at that line. Under the coalition government, they increased that quite a lot. And then, in the last few years, that has been left flat. And as it's been left flat, have a look at this. As that's been left flat, the gap between these two has got bigger. The amount that we have to pay on our earnings in tax has got bigger. And if, as is expected, Rachel Reeves decides to leave that flat, so to freeze the personal allowance for another few years, look at what happens here. Even if our earnings go up, the amount that we're squeezed by taxes goes up. And just to kind of underline this, back in 2019, 52% of income of the average earner was taxed. If that continues, it's going to be 64%. So that brings in quite a lot of extra money because we are going to be paying more in tax because of fiscal drag. But the question is that Rachel Reeves is facing, how does she raise the other money that basically will fill that hole in her budget?
Who knew we'd be talking so much about fiscal drag? But it basically means you're going to be paying more tax, is what it means. What else can people look out for?
So Rachel Reeves actually spoke to Labour MPs last night because it's been a turbulent few weeks with a lot of briefings, not just from the media, but from inside government about this budget. And she essentially told them to get behind it. She said this is a Labour budget. She said they would, when they see it, think it was fair. And she said politics is a team sport. It's not pick and mix. We've heard Labour MPs rumblings of discontent, sometimes in public, but she's saying basically this isn't the pick and mix where you can like the cola bottles but not like the fruit salads. That's how she put it to them. You have to accept the whole thing, go out and defend the whole thing. She got lots of cheers in the room, and she said in response to speculation about her position, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be here next year, and I'll be there the year after. So fighting talk from the Chancellor.
Can I just say, I don't get the pick and mix analogy, because surely the whole point of the pick and mix is you don't have to have the fruit salad if you don't like it.
True.
But she's saying it's not like a pick and mix.
Well, I think she's
we weren't in the room. It's one of those things.
Well, I think she would say.
I like the analogy, even if
my analysis of it is, I think she's saying that you have to have all the things she's chosen from the pick and mix, whether or not they like.
That's what I mean.
Like
that's not a pick and mix.
It's more like
pick and mix is you can choose. I don't know.
It's like buying a pre-made bag, I guess. So I get your point. It's like buying a pack of fruit pastels, other confectionery is available,
Exactly.
and you can't pick out the bad colours, the yellow,
fair.
let's be honest.
We need to discuss this in more depth.
We do need to talk it in more depth. I love that particular piece of confectionery. But anyway, we should also just want to reflect on, because part of this is going to be asking certain people to pay more tax, and we were talking about that with the head of Centrica, Chris O'Shea, last hour. I guess it's fair to say your pay is public. You know, you paid £4 or £5 million last year. You're one of the people with the broader shoulders. You'd be happy to pay more tax to fund that sort of thing?
I think that would apply to both of us. Anybody here in the studio, I think that we are fortunate enough to have a well-paid job. I personally would be happy to pay more. I think that's fairer. I think I believe in progressive taxation, so and that's why we call for these costs to be put onto general taxation.
What I thought was really interesting here was actually, you know, the gist of that answer, but also what he was saying previously, which was that the extra £200 or £300 that's on people's energy bills because of the green energy transition should come off their energy bills and fall into general taxation. And that way it would be much more progressive, as it would fall more on those with the broader shoulders. But it's an interesting kind of take from someone who obviously would end up paying more, that he's OK to if it's done in the right way.
Well, I think the important thing to say about Chris O'Shea is that he earns £4.5 million. He earned £8 million last year. So this is not the kind of squeezed middle talking here. And so I think people who are concerned about the prospect of taxes on the wealthy, however they end up coming through, whether it's in the form of a mansion tax, has been discussed today, is that it would fall on people who are who maybe have a high salary but aren't able to foot these extra costs. So I think he's not in that situation. And he's also unusual among business leaders to have also supported Labour's employment rights legislation as well. So perhaps that's an unusual position, but it's hard for someone in his position not to say, of course I can afford to pay a little bit more. He's actually in the past described his salary as indefensible and said that it's set by Centrica and not by him. So so perhaps his income bracket is not the one that people are concerned about the Chancellor targeting. But yes, the debate about green energy has been going on for about the last 15 years. I mean, under the coalition government, when they first raised all these green taxes to pay for the transition, it was said, why are ordinary people paying for this? Why doesn't the government pay for it? Of course, that would mean extra borrowing. The cost of a lot of this infrastructure is going to be vast. And of course, there is a discussion to be had there. But I think he is among the energy leaders who are frustrated at the sort of pace of it all, and has criticised some of the government's energy policies. So I think, I think this is going to be a big cost in the years ahead, and this debate will no doubt continue.
Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've been talking about who is going to be really hit by the budget tomorrow. People who, as Tamara was saying, might not be able to have a spare £5 million down the back of the sofa as well. How much are you feeling the squeeze? Do you feel like you've got enough money to get by? Get in touch with us on mornings@sky.uk, or you can also get in touch with us on social media as well and let us know your thoughts.
Right, let's touch on the war in Ukraine now. And Russian drone strikes hit the capital, Kiev, overnight, killing at least 6 people.
So it comes just hours before Keir Starmer hosts a virtual meeting of Ukraine's European allies to discuss a potential peace deal to try and end the war.
Meanwhile, there's been a big push at the White House to get a deal done between Ukraine and Russia, with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky set to hold talks. Well, Ivor Bennett has this update for us from Moscow.
So the shuttle diplomacy is continuing apace, it seems. Yesterday, the Americans were meeting with the Ukrainians in Geneva, remember, for a second day of talks there. But now it seems it's the turn of the Russians, with the Financial Times reporting this morning that the Americans flew from Switzerland to Abu Dhabi last night to meet with a delegation from Moscow there, and those talks are reportedly continuing today. And it's also being reported that a Ukrainian official is there as well, although it's unclear at the moment if they're all meeting together or if the Ukrainian side and the Russian side are being kept apart. But either way, it is clearly a concerted push from the Trump administration to try and find a deal that's palatable for both sides to get things over the line. It began, remember, at the end of last week with a 28-point plan, which the Americans had drawn up in secret with the Russians and then presented to the Ukrainians. But that was a one-sided plan, crossing a lot of Ukraine's red lines on things like territory, on NATO membership, on the size of its armed forces. And initially, Washington was trying to press Ukraine into agreeing that by Thursday. But over the last couple of days, it seems that Kyiv has talked Washington around more to their side. They've come up with an alternative proposal, a 19-point plan that changes or removes all those contentious points. But now the problem is that that's not palatable for Moscow. Last night, the Kremlin was saying that that alternative plan is not constructive. It doesn't work for them. And so now we're in the situation where the Americans are desperately trying to find some middle ground. But remember, this is middle ground that hasn't existed since the war began nearly 4 years ago, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed over the last few days, despite all these diplomatic developments. Well, the Russian press has gone over all the points as well, of course, particularly the counter-proposal, these 19 points, but they are presenting it as far too pro-Ukrainian. The initial plan was, they are saying, was much more kind of down the middle, much more fair to all sides. And the way they're presenting the diplomacy over the weekends, where the Europeans and the Ukrainians were getting involved, they were trying to portray Ukraine and Europe as throwing a spanner in the works, trying to derail and sabotage Donald Trump's peace efforts. They present themselves as the reasonable party, of course. But in Europe's eyes, in Ukraine's eyes, the initial plan, those 28 points, was just read like a Moscow wish list. And so that's why we're in this situation now, where we've got these two counter-offers. And in many ways, you just get a strong sense of déjà vu, because events of the last few days, OK, it's a different setting, different plans, but they are just reiterating, both sides are reiterating their long-held demands and red lines.
And whether these 28 points down to 19 points can successfully appeal to both sides seems highly unlikely at the moment. But we wait with bated breath. It's amazing how much things have changed from a few days ago already.
Yeah, certainly right. Now, on to violence against women and girls, and in particular online, because for the Lionesses, the memory of this summer's Euros final victory should be a pretty happy one. I mean, for a lot of us, it's like one of the kind of highlights of the summer, right? But for some of the players, it was actually overshadowed by the horrific online abuse that were directed at some of them.
Well, today, Ofcom is urging tech firms to do more to protect women and girls online.
The Women Watchdog set out guidelines for social media sites like Instagram or X to try and help protect women in sport, politics and other public arenas who say that they're facing significant and widespread abuse online every single day.
Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, has this report.
During the Euros, the racism sent to Jess Carter ignited calls for action. The Lioness powerfully revealing to me immediately after winning the trophy how online hate nearly forced her to quit.
Without the fans, my family, my teammates, I'm not sure that I'd ever had the courage to go back on the pitch and play again. I'm not really someone who struggles with, the hate that they receive, because everyone's going to have their opinion. But this tournament's been really tough, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to come back on the pitch and do me. And every one of those fans, I'm not ever going to be able to show my thanks enough.
But 4 months on, while Carter's been adding to her trophy collection in America, still no sign of a fresh impetus to tackle abuse from social media platforms. Now Ofcom is stepping in. The boss of the communications regulator telling me how tech firms need to make it safer online, particularly for women and girls, and particularly for sports stars.
I think we're going to lose talent in sport. Lots of places where women in particular feel that, if they go out there in a public role, they just get abused, and sometimes the toll on them and their families is not something that they can manage.
Ofcom has now advised the likes of X and Instagram to include prompts telling users to reconsider harmful messages, stopping payments if posts promote misogynistic abuse and sexual violence, and ensuring For You recommended posts have more perspectives and are not toxic echo chambers.
It's not about curtailing anyone's freedom of expression. It's about nudges and prompts. It's about better reporting. It's about clearer privacy settings. All of these ideas have come from experts or victims or survivors themselves.
There is an urgency. Sky News recently revealed suspected online hate crimes referred to police have quadrupled this season in English football. And for former England star Leanne Sanderson, the Ofcom recommendations are lacking.
I feel so passionately about there needing to be online identification to have an account because someone like myself has had death threats. I'm a woman of colour, you know, I'm gay. There's loads of things that people can't handle, and that's where it comes to me. It's not even about my job.
The job for tech firms, not just prioritising profit but protecting users. And if moves to reduce toxicity and trolling fall short, Ofcom says it will ask the government to strengthen online safety laws. But not for 2 years, when action is being demanded now to clean up their sites from vicious abuse. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Well, joining us here to talk about some of that is Ofcom's Chief Executive, Dame Melanie Dawes. Great to have you with us. There's something, to be honest, that kind of breaks my heart. You hear the England stars saying, actually, we had this incredible thing and the abuse was so horrific, I'm not sure I'll go through it again. I mean, how bad is it?
I think it's pretty bad. We know that women are more likely to get abused online than men. I mean, it isn't just women that face the abuse, but they're more likely to get it. So footballers, women, 30% more likely to experience that harassment and trolling. So it's a big problem, and it's one that the tech companies just have not prioritised. And now we have regulation. We are starting to change things, but, you know, there's a big cultural change for them all as much as anything else. So that's why we're setting out this very practical guidance today, and we're going to hold them to account for delivering on it.
You see, I guess this is the question I have. You say it's guidance. I mean, it's a little bit like, you know, telling the school bully in your nicest voice, please don't steal my lunchbox. I mean, they're just going to do it anyway, aren't they?
Well, this is... Look, firstly, there are some things in here which are already hardwired into our codes. So there are things like tackling intimate image abuse, which is where, again, women way more likely to be experiencing this than men, where images, nude images that you haven't consented to are shared online. It's a real problem. It's getting worse with AI. It's illegal. The government's put that beyond doubt. They are required, the tech companies, to take steps against that. But actually, guidance has given us a licence at Ofcom to be more ambitious. We've been out and talked to so many different groups here, sporting bodies, survivors of domestic abuse, to set the bar really high. And we are now going to challenge the tech companies to deliver on this. We're going to name how they're all measuring up against this so that people across the country can see who takes their safety seriously and who does not.
And what happens then? You know, if you are named saying, actually, you know what, you're not taking your users' safety seriously, what happens then?
Well, women make up more than half of people on social media. So I think for the first time, you're going to get a proper, comprehensive understanding of which sites are safe for you and which are not. So, for example, I've spoken to women who've been victims of domestic violence, and what they want above all else is one bundled together set of privacy settings, geolocation switched off, so they can't be found by their ex, by the perpetrator of abuse against them. And it's such a simple thing to ask of the social media companies. And I think, and the women I've spoken to are clear that they're not going to go on the platforms that don't offer that. So I think this will have an impact. We're determined to push it through. But as I say, it's a cultural change. It's going to take time.
You know, when you say things like, you know, that women can choose not to use these sites, isn't that just making the problem worse? Because this is the whole point of abuse, isn't it, right? To try and silence voices, to try and force people out of public debate. And if the thing is basically saying, oh, it's going to get so bad that women won't use it, I mean, that's a bad thing, isn't it?
Well, look, I think it depends. It depends which way you see it. I think it can never be. It's always a good thing to just be really clear with the public about what's going on. And the tech firms have not experienced this before, and we are finding that particularly with the big companies, they do want to comply with this Online Safety Act. The question is, are they really going to be bothered enough to do what that requires? Yeah. And that's the conversation we're having with them now in a very robust way, particularly with some companies. And we will be doing the same with this guidance.
Can I talk to you about algorithms? Because it feels to me like algorithms are a huge issue. Across the web, lots of different websites, people being served up content that they haven't sought out, haven't asked for, particularly children. Does the industry need to do more on algorithms? I'm particularly interested because I read a court filing in the States recently for Meta stuff, so, Instagram, Facebook, and they were comparing themselves to drug pushers in some of these quotes, that effectively that they know their content was harmful, but they're prioritising engagement over keeping people safe.
I think that's exactly the problem that we have, is that these businesses have grown up over 20 years and they have prioritised engagement. Because it's an advertising business model, and the more engagement they get, the more advertising cash they can draw in. And they've never prioritised safety because they haven't had to. And that has changed with regulation. So specifically on the algorithms, this is super important for children, because we know that teenagers' social media accounts can very quickly go into a very dark place when children have not asked for it and haven't sought it out. So we are right now doing a whole bunch of work with the big companies where kids spend their time, like Snap, Instagram, TikTok, to check those algorithms now, because they are required to be tamed and pulled back under the Online Safety Act.
Do you think they are a bit like drug pushers?
Well, that's a strong way of putting it, but I do think that, they haven't thought about what they're pushing. I think that's the way I would put it. They've been blind to that. They've been blind to who the children are and whether they're getting a different service, which we believe children need a different service to adults. They've been blind to that, and I think they've been blind to the content. And they've
deliberately blind.
Well, they've certainly not had anyone hold them to account for it, and that now does change with regulation. So look, I think you're getting right to the heart of the issue. It's deeply cultural. It's been going on for a long time. We are starting to make progress. I do want to give people a bit of hope here that regulation is beginning to work, but we do have a mountain to climb.
Yeah, we talked about Australia banning social media for under 16s. I mean, if the guys don't do what you hope that they will, do you think we should start looking at these kind of options?
Well, I think the Australian experience is going to be very interesting. On the 10th of December, they're switching off social media for under 16s. And they're calling it a delay. They're saying it's a delay, and they're investing a lot in education during those earlier years, 13, 14, 15. So actually young people are equipped when they do go onto social media. They're going to be testing the impact on kids spending time doing sport and other activities, on mental health. I mean, I'm watching that with interest, and I think we should all be, and I think the tech industry needs to as well.
Really interesting. There's a couple more industry issues I was hoping to ask you about while we're here. Sky, reportedly, in talks to buy ITV's television business, could obviously have a big impact on the TV landscape. What's your kind of initial reflections on that?
Well, look, I can't say too much about it, as you'll understand, because there would be regulatory issues to consider there. And we will look at those if we need to. I think more generally across the industry, there's a lot of change afoot, and we can see that it's becoming more global. The global tech companies and big media outfits are increasingly dominant in that landscape, and I think we therefore, need to be really thoughtful about how we make sure that the British content that we all love still has a place in what we're shown on our TV sets and on our laptops and on our phones every day.
Yeah, like you say, the industry is changing so much. Do you think some kind of consolidation is almost inevitable?
I think consolidation, partnerships, just the scale of this globally now, the need to invest in the technology, it does push towards more working together, and we have said that.
I've got to ask about the BBC as well, obviously. You have spoken previously about the BBC, in your view, not getting a grip on things quickly enough. And I think we saw that with a Panorama. I think that's probably what everyone would probably accept. Do you have more confidence in the processes now, or you still have concerns?
Well, look, I have said that before. I said it in the summer after the Glastonbury incident, and I'm afraid I think that was shown to be right again just a few weeks ago. The BBC were very slow to actually be transparent about what they were doing, and actually they'd done an awful lot, but they didn't get their message out very quickly. So, look, they have a lot to do. I think the BBC board's now very much in the frame. They've got to appoint a new Director General. Meanwhile, though, it is important to remember that the BBC does deliver a huge amount for the public day by day, and we'll be publishing our annual report at the end of this week, which will set that out. So I think we should have confidence here, but they have got to make some improvements.
You say the BBC board's in the frame. I just wondered what you meant by that.
Well, look, when you've lost your chief executive, your director general, then it goes back up. And I think, you know, they've now got to work out right at the top of the BBC how they drive that change going forward.
And Samir Shah, the chair, of course, appeared in front of MPs yesterday. He said he's going nowhere. He's got the support of the board he needs to steer the ship. Do you think he's right in that?
Well, look, I think they've got a lot of work to do. I'm not going to comment on individuals, but you know, they do have some improvements they need to make.
Do you think it's biased?
And I hope they'll be able to make them.
Do you think it's biased?
Look, we've not seen any evidence at Ofcom that they have any institutional bias one way or another. They're required to be scrupulously impartial, and you know, I think if they don't do that, then they do lose the trust of the public. But I also think it's important to recognise that we have a more and more febrile debate here, where there are strong opinions on all sides. So sometimes people think the BBC is not impartial when actually they are just themselves coming from a very strong perspective. So it isn't easy, this. But it is something that's existential for the BBC to get right.
It's been great to speak to you, as always, about a range of really important issues. Obviously know how much you sort of care about protecting women and girls online as well, so thank you. Good to have you in the studio.
A fun story now, and one that I know Sophie's particularly pleased about, which is that one of Britain's most successful gymnasts has changed his mind about retirement.
So this is Max Whitlock. I always remember Max Whitlock, just absolutely smashing it at the Olympics. I'm a sucker for the Olympic story, I have to say. He won 6 Olympic medals. He competed, of course, on the world stage. He retired after Paris 2024 because he narrowly missed out on a podium place there. But he's back.
He's back, complete. I mean, look at the talent.
It's amazing.
We were talking about this earlier. Of all of the sports one watches with such kind of admiration and being so impressed by, gymnastics is unbelievable.
I think that's what gets me about the Olympics. You kind of go in there, you don't know anything about this stuff. What is a pommel horse? I don't even, but then you just see people who just train their whole life having this moment of just magnificence. So yeah, well done, Max Whitlock. He's going to be 35, by the way, by the time of these next Olympics.
I know, just dust off the old, I guess, hands and feet. I was about to say, well, you don't really have equipment. It's all on him. Just get straight back into it as if it's...
the pommel horse, he needs one of those, probably.
Exactly. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the sequel, the Wicked movie. Number 2's out. It's done great at the box office. Divides opinion from the critics. We're going to discuss it.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. Let's get you up to speed on the top stories. The Chancellor's urged Labour MPs to present a united front ahead of her budget unveiling tomorrow. Rachel Reeves warned her Westminster peers against supporting a pick and mix of the policies they like and insisted the announcement will be fair.
Russian drone strikes hit Kyiv overnight, hours before Sir Keir Starmer hosts a virtual meeting of Ukraine's European allies to discuss a peace deal. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says a proposed plan drawn up by America and Russia has been refined, but the most sensitive points are still to be discussed with Donald Trump.
The communications watchdog says women in sport and politics are facing significant levels of abuse online every day. Ofcom is urging tech companies to step up their efforts to tackle trolling and strengthen online safety.
Now, it's the film everyone's been talking about. Wicked is back for its second and final part.
Couldn't be happier.
It's more important than ever that you lift everyone's spirits.
Well, the film has been performing very well at the box office. It earned more than $226 million in its first weekend, more than the first instalment.
It's a pretty good performance, I have to say. But look, some fans are not happy, are they ever, that it was split into 2 parts. So the Broadway play is only 2 hours, 45 minutes, and that's including a 15-minute break as well.
The film obviously split into 2 parts. So we're joined by Hannah and Benedict Townsend, the co-hosts of Talk of the Townsends podcast, which covers all things pop culture. Very good morning to you both.
Hey.
Good morning.
Great to see you. And so we were just pre-chatting a little bit, and this has divided opinion, right, Hannah, this film? But you guys are pro the second instalment of Wicked.
Yeah, look, we love Wicked. I think it's always going to divide people, and this has been something people have been talking about online for forever, like since the beginning of Wicked, which part is better, okay? And a lot of people are going to have a preference for part 1. Part 2 is still fantastic. I mean, the attention to detail of these films is incredible. I mean, they planted, like, is it 9 million tulips? It's real-life sets. It's beautiful. And I think the part 2 is brilliant as well.
And just to kind of, if you're not a Wicked fan, right, or don't understand Wicked, it kind of started off with this like, phenomenally successful stage show. It's all kind of based on the Wizard of Oz, basically, but seen through the prism of the witches, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The bad witch.
I think it was a series of books. There's books, then a stage show, now a movie. And as Hannah said, the funny thing is that all the discourse that's happening around the movie has also been happening in the musical theatre community for decades now. You know, I saw TikToks from people, you know, when part 1 came out going, I can't wait for part 2 to come out, and everyone to start arguing about which part is better.
Oh, really?
Because that argument has been roiling, you know, forever. You know, part 2, it doesn't have Defying Gravity. That's, you know, which is a very good song for part 1. But it has a lot going for it. And I think because it comes from books and from a very kind of in-depth, plotty show, there is just a lot of depth to it.
Hannah, my question on this a little bit is, you know, you guys love chatting about pop culture and films and TV throughout. Do you tend to normally agree with the critics or with people voting with their feet and their eyeballs? Because, you know, you look at this and you think, well, a hell of a lot of people have gone to see this.
Yeah.
I mean, that must mean they're liking it.
Yeah, I mean, we just go with our hearts and we enjoy what we enjoy. We enjoy such a range of film. We put opinions out there that not everyone agrees with. We don't always go with critics. We just watch things, and if we like them, we will speak about it.
And do you guys usually agree with each other or not? Because I think we have to set this up. Husband and wife podcast
I love this.
comes with some danger.
It does. I think we do broadly.
Most of the time.
Similar tastes.
What have you had a really big row about? There must be something where you were like, oh, right, you're doing dinner tonight. Like...
Yeah, the dishwasher. I don't know if there's any films that we've really clashed on.
Yeah,
our tastes tend to align.
Yeah.
Boringly, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But there is a thing, with Wicked, even if, the critics may say this or that, there is a certain type of filmmaking here that I think always needs to be celebrated, both in terms of, like Hannah said, big physical sets, old school filmmaking. It's not, all green screen and AI and whatever. It's hundreds of extras and people working. And also on top of that, it's event cinema that gets people in the cinema, in a communal space, having a nice time together. Want more of that.
Yeah, that's totally right. I mean, the cinema's kind of packed out with, kind of kids, adults, and actually you need that to drive people into the cinema as well, because it is, like you say, it's something people are cutting back on.
Big time. And Hannah, where are we now in terms of the successful trend or not of musicals being adapted for there was a great sort of surge. I probably missed out on a lot of this. I feel like Les Mis was massive. Cats wasn't so good. Wicked is back. Like, is this a sort of adaptation that's working well for the big studios or not anymore?
Look, I think it's so nice to make musicals accessible to everyone. Musicals aren't accessible to everyone. To put them on a screen and kind of get a wider reach so more people can enjoy things like Wicked is incredible. I personally always love a musical adaptation. I love a musical, though. Like, when we're speaking about Wicked online, I'm like, I love musicals, so I am the perfect audience for this. So a musical adaptation for me I will always be interested in it.
But I suppose the thing with Wicked is that it is hitting with people who aren't normally into musicals. It has that kind of wider appeal. I mean, there's a very niche percent of people who love cats, but that's its own animal, the cat. But, Wicked, for whatever reason, seems to be pulling in people who don't normally go and see that stuff.
Just finally, any tips for another podcasting duo? We've launched Cheat Sheet recently, so any tips for how to make it successful then?
Well, the tip sounds like we just have to always agree. I'm not sure we're very good at that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm not sure we always have the same opinion on stuff. That is true. Thanks both very much indeed. Great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Great to have you with us. Great to have you with us. Now, there's an awful lot of politics going on, of course, as we gear up to the budget, and a group of politicians are gathering today to try and call on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, to make more of a wealth tax. So the leader of the Green Party, Zack, Polanski, is one of them. He joins us now. Thanks for being with us. What are you hoping to see in the budget?
Thank you very much. I'm out here with a group of young people with Green New Deal Rising. They're ultimately here because they will be poorer than their parents. And what they're saying is we have a housing crisis, a climate crisis, and an inequality crisis. And what we all want to see from this budget is not tough choices for working class communities, for migrants, for disabled people, but actually tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires. It's time to tax for rich. And so we're calling for a wealth tax on assets, a 1% tax on assets of £10 million or more, or a 2% tax on assets of £1 billion or more. As well as this, to bring capital gains tax in line with income tax, so we are taxing unearned wealth as much as we're taxing earned income. Ultimately, it's all about fairness.
I guess you say that a wealth tax could raise £24 billion. These are people who can pay for the best accountants, right? They can move their assets around, they can leave the country if they need to. Peter Carl told me yesterday that he is worried about billionaires leaving the country because of this Labour government's tax proposals as it is. Wealth tax sounds great in theory, but is it realistic that there's always going to be, these kind of helpful other people who are going to be able to pay for the things that you want to spend money on?
Well, first of all, I'd hope Peter Kyle is more worried about the homeless people on our streets, or the people using food banks, rather than worrying about the multimillionaires and billionaires. But actually,
the reason that he's worried about it is because they will stop paying tax in the UK, which is what you would end up. That goes to fund things like homelessness, though, right?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, let's make sure that we're investing in HMRC so people aren't able to escape paying tax. That's ultimately about fairness. everyone, particularly the poorest people, are made to pay their tax and they're not going to get away with it. So why should the super rich get away with it? But also, we're talking about assets here. And most of the time, you can't just pick up an asset and move. The Duke of Westminster owns half of Mayfair. You can't just pick that up and move away with it. So ultimately, it's about making sure that we're targeting the assets. I also think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of wealth. Look, if you're poor, you need to make decisions based on your lack of money, and that factors into every decision. If you're very wealthy and you're being asked to pay 1% or 2% on your wealth, the idea you're just going to get up and leave the country because you don't want to pay what is a relatively small proportion of your wealth just seems a little bit absurd. And I think what it speaks to is far too often this Labour government, who have taken donations from multimillionaires and billionaires, are far more concerned about serving their vested interests rather than the communities who actually elected them to represent them.
There's talk about Rachel Reeves re-looking at council tax bans. So many people think that that is actually a very good way to tax assets a little bit more, to look at those higher valued properties and make them pay more that way. Is that something you'd support?
Yeah, I'd absolutely support that. I think there's pretty much a universal support or universal condemnation of the council tax bans, and that it's a completely unfair and unwise way to do things. So obviously this would depend on the detail that comes out tomorrow, but absolutely in principle, it's totally something I'd support.
Can I just ask you one other thing as well? You're campaigning outside with a big kind of papier-mâché model of Rachel Reeves. It's not the most flattering image, I have to say. She looks a bit like a witch. At a time when our political discourse is so toxic, do you think that's a kind of grown-up politics?
Well, I think it's difficult to make a papier-mâché of anyone that looks particularly flattering. I should say we've got one of Keir Starmer as well that isn't out here today. I think grown-up politics, or what's been known as I often get accused of doing student or sixth form politics, and what I would say is for young people I'm with today, I was also with 2,000 sixth formers yesterday, they're some of the most inspiring, articulate people who really have a vision of what this country looks like. I think you can have fun in politics and also use eye-grabbing images to get interviews like this, and also talk about the really severe issues and the difficult issues that are facing this country. I think you can do all of those things at the same time, and it's completely coherent.
And just finally, the Green Party has achieved the highest ever poll rating. You got a defection last week, a former Brighton Labour MP. Are you having conversations with any current Labour MPs about joining the Green Party? Do you think you might get another defection?
I'm really delighted how things are going. Since I was elected as Green Party leader over 2 months ago, over 100,000 new people have joined the Green Party, which is a pretty astonishing acceleration. And I would say to any person who shares the values of environmental, social, racial and economic justice, who wants to lower bills and tax billionaires, including Labour MPs, it is time to join the Green Party.
Are you having any conversations with any people who you think might actually defect? Maybe some of the people you're campaigning with today.
Yes, I'm having conversations with people all the time, including Labour MPs, about potential defections. But ultimately, I think the real thing that matters here is how we serve in communities rather than shuffling cards around on the table. What I'm really excited about is winning elections, and we're winning by-elections at the local level, week in, week out. And it's time to start doing that at the next general election too.
OK, thanks very much. Good to have you on the programme, Zack Polanski. They're the leader of the Green Party.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the budget and all the moving parts in it. In particular, the questions that people have for influencers, and we're going to discuss that in a couple of minutes.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians. Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you
say to the president? What did you
He's had a great meeting with him. He's a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah. Back up.
Mr. Navarro,
Well, it's my... I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Nigel Farage says he never intentionally engaged in racist behaviour as a teenager.
The Reform leader says there is a strong political element to accusations he racially abused fellow pupils while he was at Dulwich College in South London. Well, Tamara is here to talk more about this with us. Just talk us through the story.
Yeah, so these are allegations mainly in The Guardian, which have done an investigation into it, about comments Nigel Farage made as a schoolboy, which are alleged to be racist by children who were there at the time. These are people who were named and pictured, talking about their experiences. There was a Jewish pupil who told the newspaper that he would say Hitler was right and gas them. There are claims that non-white pupils were told to go home and that racial slurs were used against them. One of the people The Guardian spoke to was actually a teacher. Now, Reform have so far said that these claims are without foundation. There have been claims of this nature also in years gone by, but these are the most detailed. But yesterday, when journalists had the first opportunity to question Nigel Farage about it, he in fact said something different, which is that he engaged in schoolboy banter and that he never intentionally hurt anyone. This is what he said in that interview.
Can I remember everything that happened at school? No, I can't. Have I ever been part of an extremist organisation or engaged in direct, unpleasant personal abuse, genuine abuse, on that basis? No.
You're not quite, that's very, very caveated. You're not quite ruling this out. The question is, did you ever racially abuse fellow pupils in school?
No.
You've caveated it with a hurtful way.
Not with intent.
What do you mean not with intent? I don't understand what you mean by not with intent. What does that mean?
You wouldn't do.
But what does that mean?
No.
Ended there with a full no, I think, but clearly this was not, for most of that clip and most of the clip that's online, it wasn't a full denial.
No, although he said at the end when he was asked, are they telling the truth, he said no. And Reform's claims about this have changed over time. They initially said there's no primary evidence of it. Then they said the claims were entirely without foundation. And Nigel Farage wanting to say that he said things at school which may have offended people, but he never intentionally hurt anyone, and denying that he made any racist comments. I think the thing about this is there are lots of people on the record saying this. This is a man who is leading the opinion polls to be the next Prime Minister of this country, and it will be for voters to decide whether they think that this is a satisfactory answer to the question. But these are some very serious allegations. Yes, they are from a long time ago, and other than people saying it, there doesn't appear to be at this stage any written evidence, but these are detailed accounts, they corroborate each other, and I think there'll be further questions raised about this.
Tamara, thanks very much for bringing us up to speed on that story.
Right, time to talk a bit more about the budget. And of course, we've been talking about it all week and giving you various bits of perspectives from expert chart analysis from Ed Conway to all of the political movers and shakers from Tamara. But we also want to get to the questions that you have. And we're delighted to say that we're joined now to navigate that question by the finance influencer Aash Thapa, who's here to sort through it. And very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I actually kind of want to start by not so much getting your take on the questions, but what are the top questions you've been getting from your followers about the budget in advance of it?
I think the main things are just kind of around income tax and national insurance. Basically, at the end of the day, they just want to know if they're going to be taking less home after the budget. So I think that's the main thing they're worried about.
And so they're asking you what is going to happen, or what are the sort of moving parts? Do you get questions about, which we've talked a lot about, these tax bans and how that might affect people?
Yeah, because I think with the tax bans, it's around, we've had the freeze before, and with that, what they have is the fiscal drag, right? So they're worried about inflation going up and the freeze actually not actually helping them with it as well. So they want to be sure that their wages are actually moving up with inflation as well.
So it's basically about people worrying if they can make ends meet after the budget. That's the bottom line of it, right? Is there any other particular things as well? We've had a lot of stuff, obviously, a lot of chat around mansion taxes and property. Is that something that comes up?
Yeah, I think with mansion tax, what I've discussed is people who are in that range, kind of between 1.5 million and 2 million, right? A lot of them are people who are not maybe wealthy already. They've kind of just been in the property, and because of the rises, they've kind of now in that bracket of the 1.5 and 2 million. So, it's worrying for some people as well, but obviously it can also affect the people who are wealthier as well.
What about the kind of take overall? A year ago, obviously, taxes went up, but so did spending. It's a new government, it's a new approach. What about this time around? Are people kind of disappointed that taxes are about to go up, or are they understanding of it?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, because they already kind of have that expectation that taxes are probably going to go up because they have that debt, and the government needs to raise money somehow. But I think the main concern for them is kind of understanding how the government will spend that money. So there's that clear strategy, and because if they know that, then they'll be more kind of focused on, okay, this is happening in the short term, but in the longer term, are they going to bring it back down? So yeah.
And is there anything in particular kind of looking out for? We've had talk of taxi taxes, milkshake taxes. I mean, I don't know if there's anything that you've got your eye on in particular.
Just a few things. I think, like you mentioned, right, I think there's people thinking about the freezers and actually the mansion taxes as well. But again, people just want to know at the end of the day to have that stability and that clear plan. So if they have something where it's, okay, this is what we're going to do in the short term, and over the longer term, we're going to actually have a proper strategy to show you how we're going to spend your money. Because a lot of people are concerned about that as well. It's like, okay, how is it actually getting spent? Because if it's not in the right places, I'm not happy with my taxes going up.
I had a broader question for you, given the work you do on your platform, is the extent to which you think people are really engaged in financial topics, economics topics, and their level of understanding for it. It's a new thing. We talked about the curriculum review recently, and it's going to become part of the maths GCSE. Is that something you think is welcome? Is it needed? Or in fact, are people already pretty engaged in this area?
I think it's definitely welcome, 100% needed. Over the last few years, I think with social media as well, it's helped people open up a lot about their finances and become more kind of interested in taking or being more financially literate. So it's 100% needed. People, even when I'm speaking to them on the streets and asking kind of different questions, they want to know more about finances, but they just don't know where to get the information from. But now, having different conversations, it makes it easier, and even with the curriculum, I think that's a step in the right direction.
And what's your advice to people? People who are looking at the budget and they're worried, like you say, they're worried that they're going to be taxed more, they're worried that their wages aren't going to go up, that the cost of living is going to rise. What's your advice for these people?
Well, at the moment, obviously, we all know it's a lot of speculation, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to make decisions based on that. So what the best thing to do is kind of just stay informed on, what you can control. Look at the kind of basics, see where you can kind of save the extra money, squeeze it out, looking at different kind of insurance providers, broadbands, energy
Shop
providers.
around, basically.
Yeah, basically compare and see where you can squeeze that extra bit out.
And my other question, sorry, just one more thing, right? So I'm always fascinated by this. If you were Chancellor, right, because you spend your whole time looking at all these different taxes, personal finance and stuff, what would you do? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who've got like a burning desire to like sort out stamp duty or whatever it is. But what would it be that you want to do? Sorry, maybe that's just me.
Not many people would dream of that.
No, but like, maybe that's just me.
Yeah,
what
wake up every day. Honestly,
Stamp duty.
Yeah, that's a lot.
What would you do if you're the chair? Humour me.
I don't know, I feel like it's because I've been watching all the speculation around it, and it's just like, there's so much going on. It's like, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm honest with the public and make sure, okay,
good start.
Make the big decision that needs to be done and not kind of dance around anything kind of smaller and just take.
All jokes aside, there is quite a broad consensus on reforming property tax.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. That's why I said it.
Although I don't know if it's like people's dream.
It's quite outdated.
Well, that's.
Right?
I reckon. Yeah, I think there's a couple of people who dream about sorting out stamp duty. I've heard it's a pretty bad tax. So
it's like Paul Johnson, if he's watching, maybe one or two others.
Yeah.
We love Paul Johnson. That's
yeah. The IFS, they're all over this stuff. Anyway.
That was awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to have you with us, Aash. We haven't got long left of this hour. What other dreams do we have? In terms of I can't wait to get to tomorrow for the budget.
Yeah, it's been so much speculation, hasn't it? And I think finally we are getting to the time when we're going to find out a little bit more about what Rachel Reeves is going to do. We know quite a lot of it. I think it's fair to say, don't we? We know taxes are going up. We pretty much know, I think, as much as we can do before the budget, that she's going to be looking at those tax thresholds, the fiscal drag, more people paying income tax, but of course not changing that headline rate.
The big sort of other outstanding question I have is just how much she needs to raise. And, clearly a lot of the last month's pit trolling, although it's been criticised, the amount of leaks and all that type of stuff, has been to prepare us for tax rises. And Jeremy Hunt, when he was with us yesterday, thought it would be about 20 billion of tax increases, which is a lot, but it's not as bad as some of the worst estimates in the last month or two. And again, where exactly that comes out and how much of it can be captured with the less politically painful tax hikes will be quite interesting.
It really will, and also spending as well. The last budget, we all remember that as a tax-raising budget, but actually they had a huge boost to spending at the time as well, a significant boost to spending at the time as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see where they prioritise this time. It feels like the NHS and the cost of living, perhaps energy bills, are two of those.
We've got lots more to come next hour, so make sure to stick with us. We'll be talking more about the budget, of course, more about the latest peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, and joined by Rob Harris on those campaigns from the former England footballers, the Lionesses, to change Ofcom rules.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
It's Budget Eve. With one day to go, a defiant Chancellor makes a last-ditch bid to convince her own party about her make-or-break budget.
Ukraine is hit by drones overnight as President Zelensky warns against giving in to Russian demands during peace negotiations.
Tech giants need to step up and protect women and girls from online abuse. The communication watchdog talks tough, but stops short of making new guidance mandatory.
Also ahead is Black Friday a con. New research shows that some of these sales are not actually a good deal. We'll tell you which shops are the culprits.
And 2 decades on from the death of George Best, we'll take a look at his footballing legacy.
A very good morning to you. One day to go until one of the most consequential budgets in memory, and one that will have huge political consequences.
And the headlines this morning are not great for Rachel Reeves. There's speculation the Chancellor will freeze income tax thresholds, so dragging more people into paying more income tax. But she won't raise the headline tax rate. So, in other words, she'll be able to say that she stuck to her promise not to raise income tax. But it won't feel like that to people who are paying a higher rate.
She urged Labour MPs to present a united front and back her plans, and she was cheered last night at the weekly meeting of Labour MPs when she said she would still be in number 11 by this time next year and the year after that. Lots to get to on the politics, but first, here's Ed Conway breaking down the details of that rumoured rise that will be in the budget.
That was a year ago. That was the budget where Rachel Reeves said this was going to be the big tax-raising budget. She wasn't going to have to come back for much more. How have things changed so much in just 12 and a bit months? Well, the main thing you've got to know about this, OK, there are 2 factors here. The first of them is the fact that the economy isn't doing as well as a lot of people had hoped. This is just showing you productivity, which is kind of the best measure of how well off, how much better off we're getting each year. It's our bang for our buck across the economy. And up until 2008, it looked like that was kind of going perpetually higher. But then, as we all know, it didn't go higher. So it's basically flatlined or gone up really weakly since then. You can see the pandemic there. And the gap between where we might have been and where we are now is 23%. We are 23% poorer than it looked like we might have been. And that feeds into everything else. So that's 23% less in tax revenue, which means a hole in the budget. So that's number one part of the hole, and we're going to hear more from the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, about that. The second part of the hole is a year ago or so, Rachel Reeves had all these plans about cutting welfare, and a lot of them haven't happened. And as a result of them, these U-turns, the welfare bill is forecast, this is forecast off into the future, is forecast to carry on rising. And so those 2 things together, extra spending on the one hand and less money coming in because the economy's not doing as well, they're the 2 main dynamics overshadowing this budget, raising the question, what does the government do about it? Well, the main answer, we suspect, is going to be something economists call fiscal drag, which I know is terrible terminology. I'm going to illustrate how it actually works, though, because this is really important. It means basically you're raising extra money without having to raise the rate of income tax. That's showing you the median income, so average salary, average incomes across the economy before tax, going back the last few years. And this is the critical thing, is the personal allowance. That's basically the point at which you start having to pay tax on your income. So anything below that line, that's untaxed income. Anything above the line, that's tax. That's the tax, basically, that you have to pay. And here's the key thing. Look at that line. Under the coalition government, they increased that quite a lot. And then, in the last few years, that has been left flat. And as it's been left flat, have a look at this. As that's been left flat, the gap between these 2 has got bigger. The amount that we have to pay on our earnings in tax has got bigger. And if, as is expected, Rachel Reeves decides to leave that flat, so to freeze the personal allowance for another few years, look at what happens here. Even if our earnings go up, the amount that we're squeezed by taxes goes up. And just to kind of underline this, back in 2019, 52% of income of the average earner was taxed. If that continues, it's going to be 64%. So that brings in quite a lot of extra money because we are going to be paying more in tax because of fiscal drag. But the question is that Rachel Reeves is facing, how does she raise the other money that basically will fill that hole in her budget?
Well, it's certainly a big question, and we'll find out tomorrow. Tomorrow's here to talk through all the politics of this while we await the budget tomorrow. That particular measure that Ed was talking about there tomorrow, is that something that you think will be seen as breaking the manifesto or not? Or either way, will it still be something that goes down quite badly with the people that it affects?
Well, the government obviously considered raising income tax and how that would look, given that they promised not to raise taxes. Also, the headline rates of income tax have not been raised since the 1970s, so it'd be a huge move. They've instead decided that carried too much political risk, although then they could just rake in sort of £7 or £8 billion from that and not have to do loads of little tax rises all over the place. They decided it was too risky to be breaking a promise in that kind of public a way. So instead, they've gone for extending the freeze, and the attraction is that the freeze was imposed by the Conservatives until 2028, so drag more people into each tax band. You get a pay rise, then you're in a new tax band. And they've decided to carry on. We expect, this is all not set in stone, of course, we'll find out tomorrow, but the expectation is that it will be extended by another couple of years. So Rachel Reeves could, if she does that, say, look, I'm just extending what the Conservatives did, and then blame them for the legacy that she was left. Look, she said a year ago that this hurt working people, and she considered it a tax rise, so that is a problem. But as we found with the national insurance rise for businesses last year, it isn't, you know, you can say it's not technically a breach of the promise. Voters will sort of have their verdict on it. They'll be able to see it in their pay packets, but I think it's a different order of political risk in the view of the Chancellor's team.
Tamara, can I ask you about the politics? Yes. Because Rachel Reeves yesterday was, getting cheers from Labour MPs saying she's going to be here next year, she's going to be here the year after that. But I can't help but acknowledge that there are, again, leadership stories in the papers today. Allies are West Streeting, saying that after the elections next May, he's going to make a move. How precarious is the situation for Labour?
So Rachel Reeves, yes, there was some fighting talk from her yesterday. She went to see Labour MPs in a big meeting and said, we are a team, this is a team sport, politics, and basically urging them to back her budget, to say this is not pick and mix where you can stand up and go, I love, for example, the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, which we expect to happen tomorrow, but I don't love this. She said, you've got to accept the whole package. And she said, I'll be here on Wednesday, I'll be here next year, and I'll be here the year after, a kind of direct sort of I'm a fighter, not a quitter type thing. There are lots of leadership rumblings. I think they know it's high stakes. Plenty of business figures like Siobhan Haviland from the British Chambers of Commerce has said this is a make or break budget. And, with the growth forecast, of course, this government said growth was their number one mission, being downgraded, we expect. I think there's obviously a question about whether this tax rise, Rachel Reeves said last year, I won't come back for more. She did come back for more. How is going to convince them that the government can become more popular than it is currently? But so far from the Chancellor, hoping that by raising taxes, we expect in a number of different ways, including strong indications there might be a tax on high-value properties, kind of mansion tax, that they can spread the pain around. Yeah. She said it will be a Labour budget, it will be fair, and they will like the sound of it.
Zack Polanski liked the sound of that one, didn't he? Same one we spoke to him earlier.
What time does it all happen tomorrow?
12:30, so just after PMQs, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've also been asking you to get in touch ahead of tomorrow's budget and tell us your thoughts, which you have, which is great. So let's have a look at them, shall we? This is Di Davidson, who says, I haven't seen this yet, so it's kind of like the little,
They've been pinging in, but we haven't had time to walk.
Exactly. Di Davidson says, although I'm a pensioner on a low income, my feelings and concerns go out to young families where costs are astronomical for them, and yet the government want to introduce higher rate tax far too early. Higher rate tax should be paid above £70,000. What I object to is 1 million young people not in educational work, give them benefits for a maximum of 6 months, then withdraw benefits and make them work is what I think. No excuse. I had 3 jobs when I was young because my wage was low. No excuse not to work. I think a lot of people perhaps would share that on benefits tomorrow, and working age benefits at least.
Yeah, the government, of course, tried to cut back benefits by £5 billion. The Conservatives would say that's pretty modest. They claim they would cut them back by more, although they didn't when they were in office. And they failed to get it past the backbenchers. They didn't like it, so those cuts are now not in the scorecard, and the government will try and probably have another go at that in the next couple of years, but Labour backbenchers are opposed to it. So, yes, look, a lot of the Conservatives' main line of attack to the government is why aren't you cutting back the welfare state? They claim to have found lots of savings, but when they were in office, they did find it more difficult.
We got this one in, which was on NHS waiting times. We expect the NHS to be a winner in the public finances. That comes from Simon Keenan, who says, West Streeting keeps talking about cutting waiting times, but it's not true. If I'd been waiting 9 weeks for a scan, what was the waiting time before he did his job, as he frames it? he feels let down by the country on that. Another area which I think people feel, but of course last time around it got a big boost to spending the NHS, so unlikely to get anything of the same ilk this time. Do keep your emails coming into us, mornings@sky.uk or on X @Ridge and Frost tomorrow. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Now to Ukraine, because Russian drone strikes hit the capital, Kyiv, overnight, and at least 6 people were killed by them.
Comes just hours before Keir Starmer hosts a virtual meeting of Ukraine's European allies to discuss a peace deal to end the war.
And there's also been a big push at the White House to try and get that deal done between Ukraine and Russia, with Donald Trump and President Zelensky set to hold talks. This is Ivor Bennett in Moscow.
So the shuttle diplomacy is continuing apace, it seems. Yesterday, the Americans were meeting with the Ukrainians in Geneva, remember, for a second day of talks there. But now it seems it's the turn of the Russians, with the Financial Times reporting this morning that the Americans flew from Switzerland to Abu Dhabi last night to meet with a delegation from Moscow there, and those talks are reportedly continuing today. And it's also being reported that a Ukrainian official is there as well, although it's unclear at the moment if they're all meeting together or if the Ukrainian side and the Russian side are being kept apart. But either way, it is clearly a concerted push from the Trump administration to try and find a deal that's palatable for both sides to get things over the line. It began, remember, at the end of last week with a 28-point plan, which the Americans had drawn up in secret with the Russians and then presented to the Ukrainians. But that was a one-sided plan, crossing a lot of Ukraine's red lines on things like territory, on NATO membership, on the size of its armed forces. And initially, Washington was trying to press Ukraine into agreeing that by Thursday. But over the last couple of days, it seems that Kyiv has talked Washington around more to their side. They've come up with an alternative proposal, a 19-point plan that changes or removes all those contentious points. But now the problem is that that's not palatable for Moscow. Last night, the Kremlin was saying that that alternative plan is not constructive. It doesn't work for them. And so now we're in the situation where the Americans are desperately trying to find some middle ground. But remember, this is middle ground that hasn't existed since the war began nearly 4 years ago, and it doesn't seem like anything has changed over the last few days, despite all these diplomatic developments. Well, the Russian press has gone over all the points as well, of course, particularly the counter-proposal, these 19 points, but they are presenting it as far too pro-Ukrainian. The initial plan was, they are saying, was much more kind of down the middle, much more fair to all sides. And the way they're presenting the diplomacy over the weekends, where the Europeans and the Ukrainians were getting involved, they were trying to portray Ukraine and Europe as throwing a spanner in the works, trying to derail and sabotage Donald Trump's peace efforts. They present themselves as the reasonable party, of course. But in Europe's eyes, in Ukraine's eyes, the initial plan, those 28 points, was just read like a Moscow wish list. And so that's why we're in this situation now, where we've got these two counter-offers. And in many ways, you just get a strong sense of déjà vu, because events of the last few days, OK, it's a different setting, different plans, but they are just reiterating, both sides are reiterating their long-held demands and red lines.
Ivor Bennett there for us in Moscow. Now, for the Lionesses, the memory of the summer's Euros victory should be a purely happy one, but for some it was overshadowed by horrific online abuse directed at some of the players.
So today, Ofcom is urging tech firms to do more to protect women and girls online.
The watchdog has set out guidelines for social media sites such as Instagram or X to help protect women in sport, politics and other public arenas who say they're facing significant and widespread abuse online every day. Let's bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. Rob, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us on this. So just set up the sort of background and what rule changes or guidance changes is coming in.
Well, this is an issue I've been reporting on for years now, and particularly this year, the Women's Euros and other major sporting events, so many of those stars facing abuse online, and little actually can seem at times from the likes of X and Instagram, even though, Instagram in particular say they are putting in measures to protect particularly women on social media. It doesn't often feel like that at times. And now Ofcom has released this guidance. It's urging the social media firms to introduce things like prompts. So if you're about to post something racist or sexist, it will come up and advise you, do you mean to do that? Although when I've asked Ofcom, there's no specific words and phrases that they will be providing to the social media firms. Also, an attempt to demonetise posts, so people earn money the more times their posts are viewed in some cases, if you're verified, if there is misogynistic content in particular on there, and also trying to make it easier for people to block accounts rapidly and to mute them as well. And we've been hearing earlier on mornings from Dame Melanie Dawes, speaking to Sophie from Ofcom.
I do think that, you know, they haven't thought about what they're pushing. I think that's the way I would put it. They've been blind to that. They've been blind to who the children are and whether they're getting a different service, which we believe children need a different service to adults. They've been blind to that, and I think they've been blind to the content. And they've
Deliberately
often
blind.
Well, they've certainly not had anyone hold them to account for it.
Well, it'll be something that's monitored by Ofcom for the next 2 years, and then they will consider whether to push the government for a strengthening of the Online Safety Act to give them more powers to act against the social media firms, because they haven't actually been fined yet by Ofcom, which they can do with the powers that are coming in over online abuse. And there are concerns. Former Lioness Leanne Sanderson said to me that what's really needed is online verification. You have to verify your identity. But the hope will be from not just female sports stars, but women generally in the public eye, that the social media firms do take action and do actually listen to this in terms of perhaps implementing some of it, or indeed considering whether to, in terms of the view of Ofcom. But it has been a year, as we've reflected on. Great joy for the Lionesses, but I was out in Switzerland reporting on Jess Carter in particular facing the racist abuse online that forced her off social media. But better news for her this week, she also won the American title with Gotham City, so she had a victory parade in New York yesterday.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, to be honest, just to hear them talking about how much the abuse has marred what should be, you know, the greatest moment of their lives. Rob, thank you very much indeed.
Sure.
I thought it was interesting too, actually, so Melody Dawes, speaking to us earlier, was saying that she's going to be looking very closely at what's happening in Australia when they're banning social media for under-16s, watching very closely, is the words that she said. We also, of course, asked her about the BBC and what we've seen recently with the difficulties that the BBC have been having, losing the Director General, losing the head of news. And she said that if the BBC doesn't get it right, it could be existential.
The BBC were very slow to actually be transparent about what they were doing, and actually they'd done an awful lot. They didn't get their message out very quickly. So, look, they have a lot to do. They're required to be scrupulously impartial, and you know, I think if they don't do that, then they do lose the trust of the public. But I also think it's important to recognise that we have a more and more febrile debate here, where there are strong opinions on all sides. So sometimes people think the BBC is not impartial when actually they are just themselves coming from a very strong perspective. So it isn't easy, this, but it is something that's existential for the BBC to get right.
Existential, quite a strong word, I thought.
Yeah, very strong word. And I think also the sort of start of her answer on that, and you pushed her on it in a couple of areas, was also very interesting to say they've been too slow on this particular crisis. She referenced, obviously, the issues at Glastonbury. And I think my reading of it when she used the word existential was that it was the cumulative aspect of a number of things that kind of mean they now really have to sort things out, as opposed to, and I think this is really important, suggesting they were you know, having some kind of bias in a major way internally. It's just that there's been quite a few cumulative things that have caused problems.
Yeah, it feels like it's more of a process thing, getting the processes right, and that's not trying to play it, by the way, but she kind of pushed back against the idea that the BBC was institutionally biased, saying that actually what we've got with the media is an awful lot more of proudly partisan journalists in lots of different areas, and that actually that is something, and that's just part of the climate that we're working in.
We do have a breaking news line on Russia-Ukraine that's just crossed, and we've been debating whether or not the US-Ukrainian talks have been fruitful or not, and of course they've come up with new details of a plan and how those might be cemented or not. Well, we are hearing that the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, is to visit the US at the earliest possible date in November, so this month, this week, and that was something that we weren't sure would happen, but that, I guess, suggests at least the US and Ukrainian sides have reached something they agree with. Of course, much still to be confirmed on the Russian side, as clearly the Russians had agreed to something different with the US last week.
Interesting, really interesting to see if this actually does provide more fruitful, more lasting than we've seen with the talks before. Well, coming up in just a few minutes' time, we are going to be talking to the Shadow Housing Secretary, James Cleverly. Budget Eve, what have the Conservatives got to say?
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome back. Well, of course, we're gearing up to the budget tomorrow. Let's find out what the Conservatives have got to say, shall we? Joining us now is the Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. That is James Cleverly. Good to have you with us.
Hi.
Just very quickly, as a kind of former Foreign Secretary, we've seen all this stuff going on with Ukraine, potential of some kind of deal being struck, question marks over whether it's something that could ever be accepted by both sides. I don't know how closely you've been following it, but what are your reflections?
Well, any kind of deal has got to work for the Ukrainian people. That's got to be the priority. They are the injured party. They're the country that's been invaded, unprovoked invasion, and I've been to Ukraine on a number of occasions, and in all their cities, including Lviv, which is well to the west of the conflict zone, you see people that have lost limbs, you meet people that have lost family members. It cannot be the case that other countries say those fatalities, those injuries are all for nothing. So it's got to work for the Ukrainian people. And the final point that I would make in any kind of deal is it cannot be seen to reward the aggressor. It has got to re-establish the idea that you cannot redefine borders by force.
So in a way, if there's any deal which would involve Ukraine giving up land it currently holds, that feels like it would be rewarding the aggressor, right?
That's, I think, it would come across. I struggle to see how that kind of deal would ultimately be sustainable, and I struggle to see how other potential aggressors around the world won't read that as an encouragement for invasion and aggression, and that is not an environment that we want to create.
Let's talk about the budget, shall we? Are there any tax rises at all that you would support?
Well, taxes are too high. This is the simple truth that we've got to get our head around. It's stifling business. We're seeing entrepreneurs leaving the country at record levels. Business confidence is at rock bottom. Business confidence now is lower than it was at the depth of the pandemic. Businesses are more scared of this Labour government than they were about coronavirus. So we've got to do something about that. We've identified £45 billion worth of savings, which will be split between tax cuts, very, very important, help stimulate the economy, and bringing down the deficit. We're seeing none of that from Labour, and they are going to tax all the people they promised they wouldn't tax. And these taxes are now completely counterproductive. They're not even raising any money, but they are stifling businesses, they're deterring entrepreneurs, really bad for the country.
There's a couple of things there. You're saying that the taxes Labour are looking at aren't raising any money. I mean, that's not true, is it?
Well,
you can say that they have other consequences and stuff like that, but they are raising money, aren't they?
I think what we'll see is when we look back at these proposals, when we look back at these couple of years, I think we'll find that where taxes have gone up on things like national insurance, employers' national insurance contributions, any rises there will be offset by the fact we're now seeing greater unemployment. So we see property-related taxes, which are stifling the house building market and reducing the number of property transactions. So I think the balance will actually see that these taxes are counterproductive, damaging the economy, and really not raising money at all.
Talking about the council tax balance, for example, you think that will lose money?
I think...
Because there does seem to be an awful lot of people saying, look, these are massively out of date, this is actually quite a practical way of taxing assets,
there is an argument. There is an argument to look at how we fund local government, and these are things that we will look at between now and the next general election. But what Labour are doing, in contravention of the promises they made earlier, is just ramping up taxes on property like they said they wouldn't. And what that's doing is it's stifling transactions, it's stifling business, it's deterring building homes from being built, it's making it harder for people to get on the housing ladder. All these things are detrimental to the economic outlook. That's why growth forecasts have now been predicted to go, been revised downwards for the whole of this parliament.
We spoke to the boss of Centrica earlier, Chris O'Shea, which of course owns British Gas. He said that he would actually be happy to pay more tax. Would you be? Would you be?
He can.
Would you be happy to pay more tax?
No, I think taxes are too high. Look, if he wants to pay more taxes, he is allowed. Let me do which camera. You can pay more taxes. Red. There we go. You can pay more taxes. You can make voluntary contributions. I think what he's actually saying is he wants other people to pay more tax. I think other people are already paying too much tax. If he wants to pay more, he can write a cheque to HMRC and he can do that.
Your party chair, Kevin Hollenrake, posted on social media earlier this week. I just want to ask you about this. He was connecting a new badge released by Reform to a badge worn by Nazi supporters. It was a link to a Wikipedia page. Was that funny?
No, I think he was trying to make a. I think he was trying to make a point. I don't think the metaphor didn't make the point I think he was trying to make. It's not the one that I would have chosen. I think what he was highlighting was that I think Reform are now riddled with inappropriate behaviour. We've just seen the former Reform leader in Wales get sent to prison for corruption charges, receiving bribes from Moscow for repeating Putin's lines about Ukraine and the West. So I think Kevin is absolutely right to highlight the fact that there is a real problem within Reform, and a problem that Nigel Farage, when he was interviewed yesterday, flatly refused to deal with. It's not the metaphor that I think he should have chosen.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch said he was being funny. I see Reform being abusive to lots of politicians all the time. They like to dish it, but they can't take it. I mean, he is linking... he's linking a Reform badge to a Nazi badge. We can all see the point he's trying to make there, right?
Yeah, and as I say, it's not the metaphor that I would have chosen. It's not the way I would have tried to make that point. I think that Kemi does make a really interesting and important point. Farage claims to be the champion of free speech. He claims that people are too thin-skinned. He claims that people should, like, suck it up and just be tough, unless he's at the receiving end, in which case he goes crying off to nanny. So the point is, if you think that it should be a free speech environment, fine, live by your principles. But what we're actually seeing is when he's put under pressure himself, he refuses to look at inappropriate behaviour in his own party. He said that yesterday, basically saying, not my problem. He moans when he's criticised, yet he's quite happy to criticise others. So all I would ask him to do is be consistent to his own values, and all I would ask people that are thinking of voting reform is actually have a look at what you're voting for, because I don't think it's what you want.
OK, thank you very much indeed, James Cleverly. Always good to have you on the programme. James Cleverly there.
Lots more still to come here on Mornings. After the break, we're going to be talking about Black Friday, of course, biggest shopping day of the year online. Later this week, the deals that you should look at or avoid. Welcome back. Let's get you up to speed on the top stories. Russian drone strikes hit Kiev overnight, killing at least 6 people. Meanwhile, in the last few minutes, Ukraine's national security chief says President Zelensky could visit the United States in the next few days to finalise a peace deal with President Trump.
The Chancellor's urged Labour MPs to present a united front ahead of her budget. Tomorrow, Rachel Reeves warned her Westminster colleagues against supporting a pick and mix of the policies they like and said actually the announcements will be fair.
The communications watchdog says women in sport and politics are facing significant levels of abuse online every day. Ofcom is urging tech companies to step up their efforts to tackle trolling and strengthen online safety.
Now, we're talking about a new drug to treat leukemia that's been given NHS approval and, of course, hope to patients across the country as well.
The treatment was developed in the UK and works by genetically modifying cells to enable the body's own immune system to attack the cancer. Well, joining us is the Chief Executive of Leukemia UK, Fiona Hazel. Fiona, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Morning.
Just sum up for those people that don't know the basics, like what is leukemia and what does this new treatment do exactly?
So leukemia is one of the most common forms of blood cancer, which impacts the white blood cells. And essentially you get sort of an overproduction of the white blood cells in the bone marrow, and that ultimately means that they get a bit out of control and affects healthy cells. And so then you get things like infection and you sort of struggle to get oxygen and so on. So it causes you to become ill, really. But it's obviously a less common but really still significant cancer where survival is at just over 50%. So whilst there's been much progress in recent decades around leukemia, and particularly in terms of treatment, there's a long way to go. We need to improve earlier diagnosis and treatments, and that's critical to improve survival.
I mean, 50%, that is... I mean, if you compare it to other cancers where if you catch them early, you have a much better survival rate than that. Is that why there is such hope around this new drug then?
Yes, I mean, there's three really interesting reasons why this is a really significant milestone today. First of all, we need to get more innovative treatments onto the NHS and available to people on the NHS. So that's about having kinder but more effective drugs available to leukemia patients.
So just quickly on that, it basically means if you go private, then you can access better drugs for leukemia.
You tend to be able to get more access privately, but this is great news because today NICE has approved this drug for use on the NHS. But the reason why this is particularly important is that for this group of patients, of leukemia patients who have a subtype of leukemia called BALL, not only does it offer a lifeline, so it offers a chance of cure, and if not, sort of more years cancer-free, but actually for this particular group of patients who are in or sort of facing relapse or remission, or basically sort of struggling to deal with the disease, what it offers them is a lifeline, and when there's very little else available. So that's really, really important. But the other really interesting thing about it is that it's also less toxic. So a lot of leukemia treatments are very toxic. This is a less toxic option, which is great for patients. So that means that there's less impact on their health, particularly older patients who might have other conditions. But actually it also means that it might be able to be delivered without a hospital stay, which is really important. It's really important for patients, but also it's really important for the NHS because it's less of a burden. So it's really, really exciting news today, a great news story.
Very, very, very positive. And I guess despite those survival rates being lower than some cancers, I think it's fair to say with leukemia the same as all of them, the earlier you catch things, the better your chances are. And I don't know if you've seen this story in the US. It comes from someone called Tatiana Schlossberg, who's a descendant of the Kennedy dynasty, and she's just been diagnosed with terminal leukemia, but has used her platform to speak up about it. And I think one of the talking points that's come out of it and crossed the channel is the fact that so much can be done if you know. And I guess my question to you on this is, what would be the warning signs for people to get checked so that they could potentially catch it earlier than otherwise? Because it can be quite a sort of dormant problem as it builds.
Yeah, it can be really hard to spot. I mean, it's really important to say that early diagnosis is really important in cancer. It saves lives and gives you, greater treatment options, and that's true in leukemia too. So it's really important that we raise awareness, and stories like that are really important. In terms of the signs and symptoms to look out for, sort of three key things to look out for are repeated infections and unexplained infections, but also unexplained fatigue and unexplained bruising. There are other symptoms like night sweats and joint pain, but those three things are real signs that it might be leukemia. The good news is that basically there's a really simple way to rule out leukemia. So if you experience those signs and symptoms, do get yourself along to a GP. A really simple blood test, a full blood count, can actually rule out whether you've got leukemia or not. So go to your GP and don't delay, because it's really important it gets diagnosed as early as possible.
That's great advice there. So basically, if you're getting sick more often, if you're feeling tired a lot, if you've got bruising, just go to your GP, and because there are options available. Great to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, Black Friday is coming up, and you might be hoping to get a good deal on something ahead of Christmas.
But apparently new research from consumer rights organisation Which shows that as many as 1 in 8 Black Friday deals can be found at the same price or cheaper at other times of the year.
Well, to discuss this with now, Lisa Webb joins us from Which. Lisa, great to have you with us. I mean, a lot of us get drawn in by the 50% off or 20% off signs. Are you suggesting that some of those are misleading, or simply that there are other days of the year where you might get other similar discounts?
So I think the main message here is just don't fall for the hype. We've become so used to getting our inboxes inundated, our ad streams inundated with discounts telling us that this is the time to buy. But actually our research suggests that you can get those deals or better at other times of the year. And actually we found in the research we did, we looked at over 175 different products, and not one of them was actually cheapest on Black Friday itself. We saw a TV, for example, that was over £1,000 on Black Friday. The very next day, it went down to £999. And then in the January sales, it was down to 700 and something pounds. So the point here is, yes, of course, there are some deals out there, but Black Friday is hyped so much that I would say take it all with a pinch of salt.
I think that's quite unbelievable, actually. I'm the sort of person who always falls to this stuff, I have to say. Is there any way of telling what's a good deal and what isn't?
Yeah, you can actually use price tracking apps and websites where you can track the price over a period, and it can tell you what the price has been and what it might predict it to be going forward. So there's something called Price Runner, another one called Camel. There are all these sorts of websites and apps that you just pop in the URL to the product you're looking at, because let's be honest, most of us are doing this online. You pop in the URL and it'll tell you what the cheapest price has been over the last 12 months. And that means that you can look at the current price and go, wow, is that really a deal, or am I just being convinced because of so much pressure that this is the time to buy? And let's remember, nothing's really a deal unless you wanted it in the first place.
Has Black Friday now fully permeated the UK? I mean, obviously it came from the US. It's the day after Thanksgiving typically, and we used to have to wait for Boxing Day for the discounts. I mean, is it universally across all areas here now?
Yeah, absolutely. The UK has fully adopted Black Friday, but also Black Friday is no longer just the Friday. We're looking at weeks leading up to it and weeks afterwards. We've also got Cyber Monday coming the weekend, the Monday after the Friday. So this goes on for ages and ages, which means that it's just another reason why you shouldn't feel compelled to spend all of your money on that one day. Of course, people are looking for bargains at this time of year, particularly going into Christmas shopping. But just remember that this probably isn't going to be the best deal you'll see this year.
So with the research, did anyone come out as being particularly bad offender?
So actually, John Lewis and Very, both of those had over 90% of the deals that we looked at. We could have got cheaper or the same price 6 months before and 6 months after Black Friday. But I'll be honest, even though those who came out on top as having the most deals that we could find cheaper, it's across the board. I would say every single retailer we looked at least half of the deals were not really deals after all.
Gutted.
Yeah, it's a shame. Oh, well. But plenty of time still to finish your Christmas shopping. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Have you started your Christmas shopping?
For my son.
Oh, good. Good work. Yeah. It's quite organised.
Which is the main person, I think.
Yeah, I need to get cracking, I have to say. Coming up, we are going to be talking about one of football's legends, George Best. That's still to come.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On-Board Lounge. Fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, today marks 20 years since football icon George Best passed away.
So the footballer from Northern Ireland was, and look, it's still thought by many, to be the best player the world has ever seen.
That's always a contentious debate, but it's a great day to be having it. Jerry Armstrong joins us. He played with George Best and joins us now. Jerry, let's get right into that debate, because I think I'm right in reading you played against Maradona yourself, as well as playing with George Best. Who's the best?
Oh, well, I always say George was the best I played with, and Maradona was the best I played against. So different eras, but both wonderful players.
And what, in terms of Best, what made him so special on the pitch?
He was a genius. He had great balance. I always say he's like a ballerina. When he got the ball, he could go past you on the left or on the right. He had 2 feet. He could cross a ball. He could dribble. He could score goals, you know, and he was a great competitor and just a wonderful person, full stop.
I mean, look at these. I love these. We're looking at old pictures of him now. And as you say, the kind of ballerina metaphor, I think, is just so apt. To sort of dancing, you know, as you say, like around the pitch almost. What was he like as a person? Because he obviously, you know, faced some troubles in his life as well.
Yeah, well, he was always under pressure. I mean, people say he was the fifth Beatle, and, you know, he had that sort of pressure applied to him. He scored goals for Manchester United. He was just the darling of all the fans. And even fans from other clubs loved watching him because he was such a genius on the ball and he was an entertainer. And he was great to be in his company. I got to know him a lot more when I was working at Sky Sports with him. And I used to come in with Jeff and Rodney Marsh and the guys for the Saturday shows. And, you know, he was always funny and kept you amused. But, you know, it's so sad that he passed before his 60th birthday, you know, which is disappointing. But I can't believe it's 20 years that he's gone now.
Jerry, obviously burnt the candle at both ends, even during his playing days, yet still achieved so much. Preparing for this, I hadn't quite realised, actually, not only did he obviously win the titles with United, 2 league titles and 1 European Cup, he also won the Ballon d'Or. Is he someone that you think had more to give on the pitch? Had he been in today's game, today's era, with all the conditioning and all of that, or not? Was his natural talent something that just shone through regardless, and he obviously, as we're alluding to, achieved a huge amount on the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, if you can imagine the pitches he played on then, you know, and obviously the rules were different as well. You know, you couldn't tackle now like you used to do 30, 40, 50 years ago. And George, I don't know how you would have got the ball off him because he was just brilliant. And, you know, I played in games where he nutmegged the opposition at will. He used to stick it through their legs one way and he'd stick it through their legs another way. He was a real entertainer, but fans all over the world, you know, when I made my debut against West Germany, they applauded him in Cologne when he was not making some of the superstars for Germany.
I love that, the kind of flamboyance of it, the kind of almost audacity of that kind of footballing as well. So he scored 9 times for Northern Ireland. To put it in context, he scored 179 times for Manchester United. How important was it, do you think, you know, playing for his country?
Yeah, well, he loved playing for his country, but I would love to have seen him in the '82 World Cup team. You know, I think he could have actually come into the squad, and we were all hoping that Billy Bingham would chose him at the time, but it didn't happen. That would have been great to see him on the world stage, because he was made for the world stage without a shadow of a doubt.
Jerry, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
George Best. It was 20 years ago today that he passed.
Now, Nigel Farage says he never intentionally engaged in racist behaviour as a teenager. The Reform leader says there's a strong political element to accusations he racially abused fellow pupils while he was a student at Dulwich College in South London. Well, Tamara is here following the story for us. She just brings up to speed with what this is all about.
So these are the latest claims in an investigation by The Guardian, who spoke to 20 former pupils and teachers who were at school with Nigel Farage at Dulwich College, a fee-paying school, in the 1970s. And they are named and pictured. These are not anonymous claims. And they claim he made racist and anti-Semitic comments to fellow pupils. A Jewish pupil alleged that Nigel Farage would say Hitler was right and gas them. And there were claims that non-white pupils were told to go home, and that there were racist slurs used towards them. Now, there have been previous claims about Nigel Farage's school days in the past, but these are very detailed claims from a number of pupils. Now, what's interesting is a barrister for the Reform Party responded to this investigation last month, saying these claims were categorically untrue and issued an outright denial. Now, Nigel Farage was responding to those claims for the first time in an interview yesterday, and he said something slightly different. Let's have a listen.
Can I remember everything that happened at school? No, I can't. Have I ever been part of an extremist organisation or engaged in direct, unpleasant personal abuse, genuine abuse on that basis? No.
You're not quite... That's very, very caveated. You're not quite ruling this out. The question is, did you ever racially abuse fellow pupils in school?
No.
You've caveated it with a hurtful way.
Not with intent.
What do you mean not with intent? I don't understand what you mean by not with intent. What does that mean?
You wouldn't do.
But what does that mean?
No.
So he's now saying not with intent, which is slightly different. Also in that interview, he was asked whether the people were telling the truth. He said no, they are not telling the truth, and said many times that this was 49 years ago. These are serious allegations. Of course, he was a teenager at the time. It's up to voters to judge what its significance is now. But these are detailed claims from multiple people.
And have we had I guess not yet, because this was late yesterday, but an update from the official Reform response that, as you said, a month or so ago, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, was much more sort of hard-lined?
Well, Nigel Farage has been asked to respond to previous claims, and he's always talked about how there was banter and people may have been offended, but it wasn't intentionally offensive. And this was the first comment from a lawyer for the party saying this is categorically untrue. And Nigel Farage has hardened up his denial as well. In the past, he said no one has any evidence of it. This is just hearsay. He subsequently said that this is totally untrue. I think there may be more questions about this. There may be more testimony that comes out, but certainly how Nigel Farage responds to this is a serious issue as someone who is, topping the opinion polls to be the next Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Tamara Karin, there for us. So we wanted to end the programme with a little bit of good news, and it's following on from something we spoke about yesterday. David Cameron's revelation that he has successfully undergone treatment for prostate cancer. Well, that has led to a huge surge in people checking for whether they're at risk as well of the illness.
Prostate Cancer UK says in the 12 hours after the Prime Minister went public with that news, the use of its online risk checker increased by 620%, which I have to say is I'm sure, exactly why the former Prime Minister spoke up as he did to get that kind of response.
Exactly. And we see this a lot when, people use their platform to talk openly about illnesses that they have, particularly, of course, when it's stuff that is preventable if you catch it early. Jade Goody, I always think about as somebody who led to that surge in women booking into a smear test. We saw it, of course, with the King as well, King Charles, being open about his own diagnosis too.
No, kudos to Lord Cameron. Kudos as well to Nick Jones, who joined us yesterday, because, again, that's a detail of this story. David Cameron went for a test because his wife heard Nick Jones, the Soho House founder who joined us yesterday to reflect on it, talking about it himself. And these are exactly the type of reasons why people should be commended for speaking up about their private information, speaking up and using their platforms. The other thing both of them, Lord Cameron and Nick Jones, talking about was this decision that's coming on Thursday about whether or not these tests will become more rolled out and the default advisory within the NHS for people of a certain risk level to have these tests, as opposed to something that you have to seek your GP's referral to, which is the kind of norm at the moment.
And actually, a few MPs as well are calling on West Streeting today to make that screening universal to get it started.
That does it for us today. Lots more ongoing coverage of both the Russia-Ukraine peace talks and, of course, build up to the budget to come. On the other side of this short break with Gareth Barlow and Sky News Today. Don't go there.